Chapter LXXVI. Mrs. Lovett visits the bank. Mrs. Lovett, Mrs. Lovett, we are neglecting you. Excuse us, fascinating piece of wickedness. We are now in Bell Yard again. It will be recollected what a mental ferment the appearance of Ben, and Arabella, and Sir Richard Blunt, at the window of her shop had put her in. Not that she knew any of those parties, nor that she connected any of them in any way with her feelings, except so far as their attitudes may at that moment lead her to suppose. The attitudes certainly were such as to create suspicion. All this, joined to the previous state of mind of Mrs. Lovett, did not tend to produce that heavenly calm, which philosophers tell us is such a remarkably nice thing. On the contrary, the mind of Mrs. Lovett rather resembled a raging torrent, boiling and bubbling to some destruction which was afar off, and which could only be reached through the perils and dangers of some stormy passage. She was sighing for peace. She had begun to sicken for the results of her life of iniquity, not those results which an indignant and outraged public would have visited her with, but those results which she and all persons who deliberately and systematically commence a career of guilt picture to themselves. Criminality is never engaged in for its own sake. There is always some ultimate object in view, which makes the retrospect less horrible and the prospect dim and dubious, though it may be yet a thing of pleasurable anticipation. Of course, we are only reasoning upon those minds that reflect. There are many who lead a life of criminality, who do so as the manifestation of an intellect that can picture nothing else. But the reader knows that Mrs. Lovett was not of such an order. She was to some extent an educated, and to a considerable extent a clever woman. Therefore, then, she had always pictured to herself wealth and retirement, respect and power, as the ends for which she was striving with such unscrupulous means. But of late, with a shuddering horror, she had begun to dread that all she had hoped for was getting only more distant. She had contracted a strong notion of the bad faith of Todd, and if such were really the case, all was truly lost. If he allowed his cupidity just to induce him to commit the crime, that would be one too many. Destruction must fall upon them both. If likewise he instantly made an effort to take to himself all the profits of the unholy traffic that they were mutually engaged in, all would be lost to both, for was she a likely woman to crouch down in silence under such a blow? No, the scaffold prepared by her instrumentality for Todd would be scarcely less a triumph to her, that she herself would share it with him. He ought to have known better than he did. How clear and long-sighted we find people upon subjects that from this distance may be supposed to present difficulties, and yet how shallow they are upon what is close to them. One would have thought that such a man as Todd could easily have said to himself, with regard to Mrs. Lovett, I dare not tamper with the objects of that woman, and he would have said it with truth. But on the contrary, he only looked upon her as a convenient tool, which was to be thrown aside when it had served all the purposes for which he intended it. There could not have been a more fatal mistake upon the part of Todd as concerned his safety. But to return to Mrs. Lovett, the brandy she had promised to the prisoner was quite forgotten. She sat revolving in her mind how she could put an end to the state of horrible doubt and perplexity in which she was. There were some little difficulties in the way of Mrs. Lovett emerging from her present condition. It has been before hinted at that Todd and the fair lady of the pie shop had between them accumulated a large sum of money, and that the money was duly deposited in the hands of a stockbroker, who was by no means to part with it to either of them, except upon an order signed by both. So far all looked fair enough, and as they were likewise bound together by such a bond of mutual guilt, it did not look likely that either would make an endeavor to get the better of the other. Suppose there was GBP 40,0 in the hands of the stockbroker, it did not seem, we say, under all the circumstances likely that Todd, being fairly entitled as between them to GBP 20,0, would peril the safety of both their necks by getting up a quarrel about the division equably of the spoil. The same reasoning will apply to Mrs. Lovett. But these unlikely things are the very things that do come to pass to upset the finest plans. Todd never from the first, whenever that was, meant that Mrs. Lovett should share with him. No, he thought that he, as the superior genius, the greater villain, would manage to cheat her, and that she would, for her own safety's sake, be obliged to put up with what he chose to give her. That would have been only such a pittance as to keep her constantly in a state of dependence upon him. Now, to do Mrs. Lovett justice upon the old equitable principle of giving the devil his due, she never had any intention, until she saw symptoms of bad faith in Todd, of attempting to act otherwise than fairly by him. She loathed him, and all she meant to do was, when the division of the spoil should take place, to ascertain where he was going, and then to get as far off him as possible. Of late, however, finding that Todd was getting lucky, and feeling quite convinced that he aimed at her life, other views had dawned upon her, as we are already well aware. She did not so much care for all the money as she would have liked in her retirement, wherever it was, to have felt sure that Todd was not an inhabitant of the earth, and therefore she had taken the pains, all of which had been frustrated, to put him into another world. But a feeling, superstitiously consequent upon her failure, had started up in her mind that he bore a charmed life, and therefore she bethought herself of flying from England. But the money, how was she to get the money to do so? How was she, without his cognizance, to get her share of the funds which had been placed in the hands of a stockbroker? Now, since she had begun to feel uncomfortable regarding the faith of Todd, Mrs. Lovett had kept what cash she saved at home. There for some weeks had elapsed since she had paid a monetary visit to the city. If she had gone as usual, she may have got some news. To a woman of lively and discursive imagination like Mrs. Lovett, a plan of operation was not long in suggesting itself. Why, she asked herself, should she hesitate to put Todd's name to the document necessary to get her half of the money from the stockbroker? What a natural consequence from this question it was to ask herself another, which was, if I am forging Todd's signature at all, may I not do it for the whole amount as for half, and so take the only revenge upon him which he would feel, or which I dare offer myself the gratification of exacting from him? When such a question as this is asked, it is practically answered in the affirmative. Mrs. Lovett felt quite decided upon it. She was a woman of courage. No faint-hearted scruple interposed between the thought and the execution of a project with her. The recent scene that had taken place in front of her window decided her. Now or never, she told herself. Now or never is the time to escape. I have nothing to encumber myself with. Let Todd keep his jewels and trinkets. All I want is the money, which is in the hands of Mr. Anthony Brown, the stockbroker, and that I will have immediately. Mrs. Lovett did not know the exact amount, but as it was a joint account, such an amount of ignorance need not appear at all surprising to the stockbroker. So she drew up an order for the money, and signed it with both Todd's name and her own, leaving a blank for the amount. She then carefully locked up all doors but that of the outer shop, and having procured the services of a young girl from a greengrocer's shop in the vicinity to mind the place for an hour, as she said, she considered she was all right. The girl had attended to the shop before for Mrs. Lovett at times, when no batches of pies were expected from the regions below, so she did not feel at all surprised at the call upon her services. I shall be an hour, said Mrs. Lovett. You can take a pie or two for yourself if you feel at all hungry, and if Mr. Todd should come in, say I'm going to call upon a dressmaker in Bond Street. Yes, mum. Mrs. Lovett left the shop. At the corner of Bellyard she turned and cast a glance at it. She hoped it was a farewell one. She shuddered and passed on, and then she muttered to herself, if I am, which assuredly I shall be, successful in the city, I will take post horses there at once for some seaport, and from there reach the continent, before Todd can dream of pursuit, or find out what I have done, or where bestowed myself. She was not so impudent as to pass Todd's shop, but she went down one of the streets upon the opposite side of Fleet Street, and came up another, which was considerably past the house, which was so full of horrors. A lumbering old hackney coach met her gaze. It was disengaged, and Mrs. Lovett got into it. "To Lothbury," she said, and after swaying to and fro for a few moments, the machine was set in action and duly steering up Ludgate Hill. The impatience of Mrs. Lovett was so great that she would gladly have done anything to induce the horses to go at a faster rate than the safe 2.5 miles an hour to which they were accustomed. But she dreaded that if she exhibited any signs of extreme impatience she may excite suspicion. To the guilty, any observation of a more than ordinary character is a thing to dread. They would fain glide through life gently, and not at all do they sigh to be the observed of all observers. But the longest journey evening in the slowest hackney coach must come to an end. As Ben the beefeater would have said, easy does it, and as Mrs. Lovett's journey was anything but a long one, the gloomy precincts of Lothbury soon loomed upon her gaze. After the customary oscillations and wheezing and creaking of all its joints and springs, the coach stopped. "Wait," said Mrs. Lovett with commendable brevity, and alighting, she entered a dark doorway upon the side of which was painted, in letters that had contracted so much the color of the woodwork that they were nearly illegible, "Mr. Anthony Brown." This was the stockbroker, who held charge of the ill-gotten gains of that pair of unworthies, Mrs. Lovett and Sweeney Todd. A small door, covered with what had been green baize, but which was now of some perfectly original brown, opened into the outer office of the man of business, and there a spruce clerk held dominion. At the sound of the rustling silks of Mrs. Lovett, he raised his head from poring over the cumbrous ledger, and then seeing, to use his own vernacular, it was a monstrous fine woman, he condescended to alight from his high stool, and he demanded the lady's pleasure. "Mr. Brown." "Yes, madam, certainly. Mr. B. is in his private room. What name shall I have the pleasure of saying?" "Lovett." "Lovett." "Yes, madam, certainly. Ahem. Pray be seated, madam, if you please." Mrs. Lovett made a gesture of dissent, and the clerk went upon his errand. He was scarcely absent a moment, and then holding open a door, he said, with quite a chivalric air, "This way, if you please, madam." A monstrous fine woman, he added to himself. The door closed after Mrs. Lovett, and she was in the private room of Mr. Anthony Brown. "Ah, Mrs. Lovett, pray be seated, madam. I am truly glad to see you well. Well, to be sure, you do look younger, and younger, and younger, every time I have the pleasure of a visit from you." "Thank you, Mr. Brown, for the compliment. My visits have not been so numerous as usual of late." "Why, no, ma'am, they have not. But I hope we are going to resume business again in the old way." "Not exactly." "Well, my dear madam, whatever it is that has procured me the honor and the pleasure of this visit, I am sure I am very glad of it, and shall not quarrel with it." Nice weather, Mrs. Lovett. Very. Ah, madam, ah. It was a world of pities to disturb the investments. It was truly, but ladies will be ladies, sir. I merely said ladies will be ladies, you know. And truly, I fully expected the interesting ceremony had come off before now. I did truly, and I should have wagered a new hat. "Mr. Brown, what are you talking about?" "About? Yes, what do you mean?" "Why, that is, the about concerning the, my dear madam, if I have inadvertently trodden upon your sensibilities, I really." "You really what?" Mr. Brown looked perplexed. Mrs. Lovett looked a little furious. "Sir," she said, "before I explain the cause of my visit to you, I insist upon knowing to what all your mysterious hints and remarks allude." "Speak freely and plainly, sir." "Well then, madam, when Mr. Todd was last here, he said that you had at last consented to reward years of devotion to you by becoming his, and that the ceremony which was to make him a happy man by uniting him to so much excellence and beauty was to come off almost immediately, and that was the reason you had both agreed to withdraw all the money I had in such snug and comfortable safe investments for you both." He Chapter LXXVI Mutual Defiance. Be so good, reader, as to picture to yourself the look of Mrs. Lovett. We feel that one brief moment of imagination will do more to enable you to feel and to see with your mind's eye her aspect than as if we were to try a paragraph upon the subject. How that he of Mr. Brown's rung in her ears. It was at any time almost enough to provoke a saint, and we need not say that this time of all others was not one at which Mrs. Lovett's feelings were attuned to gentleness and patience. Besides, she certainly was no saint. A rather heavy inkstand stood upon the table between Mrs. Lovett and the stockbroker. The next moment it narrowly escaped his head, leaving in its progress over his frontispiece a long streak of ink down his visage. Wretch, said Mrs. Lovett, it is not true. Murder, cried Mr. Brown. Mrs. Lovett covered her face with both her hands for a moment, as though, to enable her to think clearly, it were necessary to shut out the external world, and then starting up, she advanced to the door of the room. Murder, said the stockbroker again. Silence. A constable. If you dare to say one word of this interview, I will return and tear you limb from limb. Mrs. Lovett opened the door of the private room with such a vengeance that the nose of the clerk, who had been listening upon the other side, was seriously damaged by that. He started back with a howl of pain. Fool, said Mrs. Lovett, as she passed him, and that was all she condescended to say to him, not by any means an agreeable reminiscence of his last words with a lady to a gentleman who prided himself upon his looks, rather. Mrs. Lovett reached the street and walked for some distance as though street it was not. She was only roused to a sense of the world in which she was by hearing the sound of a voice calling, Mum, mum. Here yer is, mum, mum. Woo. She turned and saw the coach in which she had come to the stockbroker. Going back, mum? Said the man. Yes, yes. She stepped into the vehicle, looking more like an animated statue than aught human. The man stood touching what was once the brim of a hat as he said, Where to, mum? Mrs. Lovett looked at him with an air of such abstraction that it was quite clear she did not see him, but she heard the question that came to her like an echo in the air. Where to, mum? To Fleet Street. Wheeze, creak, sway, sway, and the coach moved on again. Mrs. Lovett sunk down among the straw with which the lower part of the vehicle was plentifully strewed, and then, with her head resting upon the seat, her throbbing temples clasped in her hands, she tried to think. Yes, she called upon all that calmness, that decision, that talent or tact, call it which you will, that had saved her for so long, not to desert her now in this hour of her dire extremity. She called upon everything for aid but upon heaven, and then, to ease her mind, she cursed a little. Somebody says swearing when the passions are at war and light the chambers of the brain with anger's flash, has an effect quite moral, a kind of safety valve, sparing what may be a tremendous crash. And so Mrs. Lovett got cooler, but not a whit the less determined, as the crazy vehicle conveyed her to Fleet Street. She fully intended now to measure conclusions with Todd. The distance was so short. That evening a hackney coach performed it with tolerable promptitude. Mrs. Lovett did not wish to alight exactly at the door of Todd's shop, so she was rather glad upon finding the coach stop at the corner of Fleet Street by the Old Market, and the driver demanded what number. This will do. She was in the street in another minute. It took a minute to get out of a hackney coach. It was like watching the moment to spring from a boat to the shore in a heavy surf. And yet, O much vilified old hackney coach, how much superior were you to your bastard son, the present odious rattling, bumping, angular, bone dislocating, horrid cab. The driver received about double his fare, and a cabman of the present day would have gathered a mob by his vociferations and blackguarded you into a shop if you had treated him in such a way. Nothing less than 3 times what he's entitled to ever lights up the smallest spark of civility in the soul of a modern cab driver, but the old hackney coachman was always content with double, so upon this occasion Mrs. Lovett got a "thank ye, mum," and a long straw that had taken an affection for the skirt of her dress was arrested by Jarvey and restored to the coach again. Mrs. Lovett walked to all appearance composedly up Fleet Street. Alas, in this world who can trust to appearances? She had time, before reaching the shop of Sweeney Todd, to arrange slightly what she should say to that worthy. Of course, he could know nothing of her visit to the city, of her interview with Mr. Brown, and she need not blurt that out too soon. She would argue with him a little, and then she would be down upon him with the knowledge of his knavery and treachery. She reached the shop. No wonder she paused there a moment or two to draw breath. You would have done the same, and after all, Mrs. Lovett was mortal, but she did not hesitate for long. The threshold was crossed, the handle of the door was in her hand, it was turned, and she stood in Todd's shop. Todd was looking at something in a bottle, which he was holding up to the light, and Mrs. Lovett saw, too, that a pretty genteel-looking lad was poking about the fire as if to rouse it. "Ah, Mrs. Lovett," said Todd, "how do you do? Some more of that fine grease for the hair, I suppose, madam?" Todd winked towards the lad, "Our dear friend Johanna," as though he would have said, "Don't appear to know me too well before this boy. Be careful, if you please. I have something to say to you, Mr. Todd." "Oh, certainly, madam. Pray walk in, this way, if you please, madam, to my humble bachelor parlor, madam. It is not fit exactly to ask a lady into, but we poor miserable single men, you know, madam, can only do the best we can. Hall, this way. No, not come in. No, I have something to say to you, Mr. Todd, but I will say it here. And now, Mrs. Lovett gave a sidelong glance at the seeming boy, as much as to say, "You can easily send him away if you don't want him to listen to our discourse." Todd saw the glance, and the diabolical look that he sent to Mrs. Lovett in return would truly have appalled any one of less nerve than she was possessed of. But she had come to that place wound up firmly to a resolution, and she would not shrink. Todd had no resource. "Charlie," he said, "you can go and take a little turn. Here is a penny to spend. Get yourself something in the market. But be sure you are back within half an hour, for we shall have some customers, no doubt." "Yes, sir." Johanna did not exactly know whether to think that Mrs. Lovett came in anger or friendship, but, at all events, she felt that it would be hazardous to remain after so marked a dismissal from Todd, although she would gladly have heard what the subject of the conversation between those two was to be. Neither Mrs. Lovett nor Todd now spoke until Johanna had fairly gone and closed the door after her. Then Todd, as he folded his arms and looked Mrs. Lovett fully in the face, said, "Well, the time has come." "What time?" "For the end of our partnership, the dissolution of our agreement. I will go on no further. You can do as you please, but I am content." "Humph," said Todd, after much thought. "I have come to this conclusion, Todd. Of course, let me be where I may, the secret of our road to fortune remains hidden here." She struck her breast as she spoke. "All I want is my half of the proceeds, and then we part, I hope, forever." "Humph," said Todd, and the sooner we can forget, if that be possible, the past, the better it will be for us both. Only tell me where you purpose going, and I will take care to avoid you." "Humph." Passion was boiling in the heart of Mrs. Lovett, and that was just what Todd wanted, for well he knew that something had gone amiss, and that as long as Mrs. Lovett could keep herself calm and reasonable, he should stand but a poor chance of finding out what it was, unless she chose, as part of her arrangement, to tell it. But if he could but rouse her passion, he should know all. Therefore was it that he kept on replying to what she said with that cold, insulting sort of "Humph. Man, do you hear me? Humph. You villain. Humph." Mrs. Lovett took from a side table an iron, which, in the mystery of hairdressing, was used for some purpose, and in a cool, calm voice, she said, "If you do not answer me as you ought, I will throw this through your window, into the street. and the first person who comes in consequence, I will ask to seize Todd, the murderer, and offer myself as evidence of his numerous atrocities, contrite evidence, myself repenting of my share in them, and relying upon the mercy of the crown, which, in recompense for my denouncing you may graciously pardon me. And so it has come to this, said Todd. You see and hear that it has. It was rather a curious coincidence that Mrs. Lovett had threatened Todd that she would awaken public attention to his shop by the same means that Sir Richard Blunt had recommended to Johanna to use in case of any emergency, namely, throwing something through the window into the street. If Mrs. Lovett had been goaded by Todd to throw the iron through a pane of his glass, the officers of Sir Richard would quickly have made their appearance to hear her denunciation of the barber. Unhappy woman, if she had but known what the future had in store for her, that act which she threatened Todd with, and which to her imagination seemed such a piece of pure desperation, would have been the most prudent thing she could have done. But it was not to be. There was a few moments' silence now between them. It was broken by Todd. "Are you mad?" he said. "No." "Then, what, in the name of all that is devilish, has got possession of you? I have told you my determination. Give me £20,000. You may profit by the odd sum. Give me that amount, and I will go in peace. You know I am entitled to more, but there is no occasion for us to reckon closely. Give me the sum I seek, and you will see me no more. You take me by surprise. Just step into the parlor and—" "No, no. Why not? Do you suspect?" "I suspect nothing, but I am sure of much. Now, for me to set foot within your parlor would be tantamount to the commission of suicide, and I'm not yet come to that. You understand me." Todd understood her. His hand strayed to a razor that lay partially open close to him. Mrs. Lovett raised the iron. Mrs. Lovett and Todd quarrel. Mrs. Lovett and Todd quarrel. "Beware," she said. Todd shrunk back. Foe, this is child's play," he said. "You and I, Mrs. Lovett, ought to be above all this, far above it. You want your half of the proceeds of our joint business, and I must confess, at the moment, that the demand rather staggered and distressed me, but the more I think of it, the more reasonable it appears." "Very well, give it to me, then." "Why, really now, my dear Mrs. Lovett, you quite forget that all our joint savings are in the hands of Mr. Brown." Todd glared at her as though he would read her very soul. She felt that he more than suspected she knew all, and she adopted at once the bold policy of avowing it. "I do not forget anything that it is essential should be remembered," she said. "And among other things, I know that, by forging my name, you have withdrawn the whole of the money from the hands of Brown. It is not worth our while to dispute concerning your motives for such an act. Let it suffice that I know it, and that I'm here to demand my due." Ha, you laugh. "I do, truly. Why, really now, ha, this is good. And so it is this withdrawal of the money from Brown that has made all this riot in your brain? Why, I withdrew it from him simply because I had certain secret information that his affairs were not in the best order, and from a fear, grounded upon that information, that he may be tempted to put his hand into our purse, if he found nothing in his own. Well, it matters not what were your reasons. Give me my half. It will be then out of your custody, and you will have no anxiety concerning it, while I can have no suspicions. In a moment, you will, if I had it here, but I have reinvested the whole, you see, and cannot get it at a moment's notice." Chapter LX6. Mrs. Lovett finds that in this world there is retribution. "Black," said Mrs. Lovett. "Yes, black. Do you think me so?" "Green," she was going to say, but the accidental conjunction of the colors, brown, black, and green, suddenly struck her as ludicrous, and she altered it to foolish. "Do you think me so foolish as for one moment to credit you? Hark you, Mrs. Lovett," pursued Todd, suddenly assuming quite a different tone. "You have come here full of passion, because you thought I was deceiving you. You are. Allow me to proceed. It is, I believe, one of the penalties of all associations for why do I hesitate about a word? Guilty purpose is that there should be mutual distrust. I tell you again that if I had not moved the money from Brown, we should have lost it all. But why not come to me and get my signature? There really was not time, said Todd, dropping his words out one by one with a staccato expression. That is too absurd. Todd shrugged his shoulders as though he would have said, well, if you will have it so, I cannot help it. And then he said, I was in the city. I heard the rumor of the instability of Brown. I flew into a shop. I wrote the order like a flash of lightning. I went to Brown's like an avalanche, and I brought away the money, as if heaven and earth were coming together. There was not the ghost of a smile upon Todd's face as he made use of these superlatives. Mrs. Lovett began to be staggered. Then you have it here? No, no, you have. Tell me that you have, and that this Mr. Black you mentioned is a mere delusion. Black may be no color, but it is not a delusion. You trifle with me. Beware. In a word, then, my charming Mrs. Lovett, I dreaded to bring the money here. I thought my house the most unsafe place in the world for it. I and you stand upon the brink of a precipice. A slumbering volcano is beneath our feet. Pshaw! Where is your old acuteness? That you do not see at once how truly foolish it would have been to bring the money here. Juggler. Fiend. Hard words, Mrs. Lovett. She dashed her hand across her brow, as though by that physical effort she could brush from her intellect the sophistical cobwebs that Todd had endeavored to move before it, and then she said, I know not. I care not. All I ask, all I demand is my share of the money. Give it to me, and let me go. I will. This day. Stay, the day is fast going, but I will say this night, if you really, in your cool judgment, insist upon it. I do. Well, you shall have. This night after business was over and the shop was closed, I intended to have come to you, and fully planned all this that you have unfortunately tortured yourself by finding out. I regret that you think of so quickly leaving the profits of a partnership which, in a short time longer, would have made us rich as monarchs. Of course, if you leave, I am compelled. You compelled? Yes. How can I carry on business without you? How could I, without your aid, dispose of the— Hush, hush. Mrs. Lovett shuddered. As you please, said Todd. I only say, I regret that a co-partnership that promised such happy results should now be broken up. However, that is a matter for your personal consideration merely. If I had thought of leaving, and being content with what I had already got, of course it would have compelled you to do so. Therefore I cannot complain, although I may regret your excuse of a right of action that equally belonged to me. If I only thought you sincere. And why not? If I could only bring myself to believe that the money was once more rightly invested. You shall come with me yourself, if you like, in the morning to Mr. Black the broker in Upchurch Lane, No. 3, and ascertain that all is right. You shall there sign your name in his book, so that he may know it, and then you will be satisfied, I presume? Yes, I should then. And this dream of leaving off business would vanish. Perhaps it would. But what? Why did you say to Brown that our union was to take place? Because it was necessary to say something to account for the sudden withdrawal of the money, and surely I may be pardoned, charming Mrs. Lovett, for evening in imagination dreaming that so much beauty was mine. The horrible leer with which Todd looked upon her at this moment made her shudder again, and the expression of palpable hatred and disgust that her countenance wore added yet another, and not the least considerable, link to the chain of revenge which Todd cherished against her in his cruel and most secret heart. While he was philosophizing about guilty associations producing a feeling of mutual distrust, he should have likewise added that they soon produce mutual hatred. For a few moments they looked at each other, that guilty pair, with expressions that sought to read each other's souls, but they were both tolerable adepts in the art of dissimulation. The silence was the most awkward for Todd, so he broke it first by saying, You are satisfied, let me hope. I will be. You shall be. Yes, when I have my money. Henceforward, Todd, we will have much shorter reckonings, so shall we keep much longer friends, if you keep, in some secret place, your half of the proceeds of our business, said Todd. Mrs. Lovett made a sort of gulf of the word, but she adopted it. If you, I say, keep your half of the proceeds of our business, and I keep mine, I don't see how it is possible for us to quarrel. Quite impossible. He began to strop a razor diligently and to try its edge across his thumb nail. Mrs. Lovett's passion, that overwhelming passion which had induced her to enter Todd's shop, and defy him to a species of single combat of wits, had in a great measure subsided, giving place to a calmer and more reflective feeling. One of the results of that feeling was a self-question to the effect of what will be the result of an open quarrel with Todd. Mrs. Lovett shook a little at the answer she felt forced to give herself to this question. That answer was continued in two words: mutual destruction. Yes, that would be the consequence. Todd, she said in a softened tone, if I had forged your name, and gone to the city and possessed myself of all the money, what would you have thought? Tell me that. Just what you thought. That it was the most scandalous breach of faith that could possibly be, but an explanation ought to put that right. It has. Then you are satisfied? I am. At what time shall we go together? To-morrow morning, to Mr. Black's in Upchurch Lane. Name your own time, said Todd with the most assumed air in the world. Black lives at Balham Hill and don't get to business until 10, but any time after that will do. I will come here at 10, then. So be it. Ah, Mrs. Lovett, how charming it is to be able to explain away these little difficulties of sentiment. Never trust to appearances. How very deceitful they are apt to be. There was an air of candor about Todd that may have deceived the devil himself. Notwithstanding all his hideous ugliness, notwithstanding his voice was of the lowest order, and notwithstanding that frightful laugh, and that obliquity of vision that seemed peculiar to himself in its terrible malignancy, there was a plausibility about his manner, when he pleased, that was truly astonishing. Evening Mrs. Lovett, with all her knowledge of the man, felt that it was a hard struggle to disbelieve his representations. What must it have been to those who knew him not? No, said Mrs. Lovett, it don't do to trust to appearances. She still held the iron in her hand, nor, added Todd, giving the razor he had been putting an edge to, a flourish, nor will it do to listen always to the dictates of compassion, for if we did, what miseries may we inflict upon ourselves? Now, here is a cure in point, where I allude to this little affair between us. If you had flown to Bow Street, and there, to spite me, made a full disclosure of certain little facts, why, the result would have been that we may both have slept in Newgate tonight. Yes, yes, and then there would have been no recall. You could not have freed us by telling the police that you had made a mistake. Then the gallows would have risen up in our dreams. Horrible, and it being easily discovered that it was no love of public justice or feeling of remorse that induced you to the betrayal, they would have shown you no mercy, but you would have swung from the halter amid the shouts and execrations of, no, no, I say yes. No more of this, no more of this. Can ye bear to paint such a picture? Does it not seem to you as though you stood upon that scaffold and heard those shouts? Oh, horror, horror, you don't like the picture? No, no, ha, ha. Well, Mrs. Lovett, you and I had far better be friends than foes, and above all, you ought by this time to feel that you could trust me. The very fact that to all the world else I am false ought to prove to you that to you I am true. No human being can exist purely isolated, and I am not an exception. Say no more, say no more. We will meet to-morrow. To-morrow be it, then. At 10. At 10 be it, and then we will go to Black. Come now, since all this is settled, take a glass of wine to our— No, no, not that. I am not very well, a throbbing headache, that is, no, as you please, as you please. By the by, did Black give me a receipt, or did he say it was not usual? Stay a moment, I will look in my secretaire. Sit down a moment in the shaving chair. I will be with you again directly. We will settle that to tomorrow, said Mrs. Lovett. I feel convinced that Black did not give you a receipt. Good day. She left the shop, unceremoniously carrying the iron with her. Todd breathed more freely when Mrs. Lovett was gone. He gave one of his horrible laughs as he watched her through the opening in his window. Ha, ha, curses on her. But I will have her life first, before she sees 1 guinea of my hoard. He saw Charlie Green crossing the road. Ah, the boy comes back. It is well. I don't know how or why it is, but the sight of that boy makes me uneasy. I think it will be better to cut his throat and have done with him. Todd was suddenly silent. He saw 2 women pass, and as they did so, one pointed to his shop and said something to the other, who lifted up her hands as though in pious horror. One of these women was Mrs. Ragg, poor Tobias's mother. The other was a stranger to Todd, but she looked like what Mrs. Ragg had been, namely, a laundress in the temple. Curses, he muttered. Johanna entered the shop. Todd caught up his hat. Charlie, yes, sir. I shall be gone 5 minutes. Be vigilant. If anyone should come, you can say I have stepped a few doors off to trim Mr. Pentweasel's whiskers. Yes, sir. Todd darted from the shop. Mrs. Ragg and her friend were in that deep and earnest course that is a foe to rapid locomotion, so they had not got many yards from Todd's door. He was rarely seen, however, for either to paint a moral or adorn a tale. Mrs. Ragg turned suddenly and pointed to the shop, and then both the ladies lifted up their hands as though in horror, after which they resumed their deep and all-absorbing discourse as before. Chapter 80. Todd takes a journey to the temple. The 2 females took their way to the temple. Todd had been quite right in his conjectures. The friend of Mrs. Ragg was one of the old compatriots of the laundress tribe, and that good lady herself, although, while there was no temptation to do otherwise, she had kept well the secret of her son's residence at Colonel Jeffrey's, broke down like a frail and weak vessel as she was with the weight of the secret the moment she got into a gossip with an old friend. Now Mrs. Ragg had only come into that neighborhood upon some little errand of her own, and with a positive promise of returning to the Colonel's house as soon as possible. She would have kept this promise, but that amid the purlieus of Fetter Lane she encountered Martha Jones, her old acquaintance. One word begot another, and at last as they walked up Fleet Street, Mrs. Ragg could not help, with many head-shakings and muttered interjectional phrases, letting Martha Jones know that she had a secret. No, as she passed Todd's shop, she could not help intimating that she fully believed certain persons, not 100 miles off, who may be Barbers or who may not, would some day come to a bad end in front of Newgate, in the Old Bailey. It was at this insinuation that Martha Jones lifted up her hands and Mrs. Ragg lifted up hers in sympathy. Todd had seen this action upon the part of the ladies. To overhear what they were saying was to Todd a great object. That it in some measure concerned him he could not for a moment doubt, since the head-shaking and hand-uplifting reference that had been made to his shop by them both as they passed could not mean anything else. And so, as we have said, he followed them cautiously, dodging behind bulky passengers, so that they should not see him by any sudden glance backwards. One corpulent old lady served him for a shield half up Fleet Street, until, truly, she turned into a religious bookseller's shop, and left him nothing but thin passengers to interfere between him and the possibility of observation. But Mrs. Ragg and her friend Martha Jones were much too fully engaged to look behind them. In due course, they arrived opposite to the temple, and then, after much flurrying, in consequence of real and supposed danger from the passing vehicles, they got across the way. They at once dived into the recesses of the legally learned temple. Todd dashed after them. Now, my dear Mrs. Ragg, said Martha Jones, you must not say no. It's got a beautiful head upon it, and will do you good. No, no, really, like cream, but really, come, it ain't often you is in the temple, and I knew very well he don't miss a bottle now and then, and 'twixt you and me and the pump, I think we has as much a right to that beautiful bottled ale as Mr. Juggus has, for I'd take my Bible oath he don't mean to pay for it, Mrs. Rag. You don't say so? Yes, I does, Mrs. Rag. Oh, he's a bad un, he is. Ah, Mrs. Rag, you don't know, nor nobody else, what takes place in his chambers of a night. Is it possible? Yes. I often say to myself what universal profundity he must be possessed with, for he was once intended, he says, for the church, and I heard him say he'd have stuck to it like bricks, if he could have heard of any church that was intended for him. Shucking. Yes, Mrs. Rag, there's profundity for you. Did Martha Jones mean profanity? Ah, interposed Mrs. Rag, we live in a world. Yes, Mrs. Rag, we does, but as you was a saying, as you was a saying about somebody being hung if rights was rights, you know. Oh, dear, really, you must not ask me. Truly, you must not. Well, I won't, but here we are, in Pump Court. Todd darted into a doorway and watched them up the staircase of No. 6. In that highly classic locality, he slunk into the doorway, and by taking a perspective glance up the staircase, he saw them stop upon the first floor. He saw that they turned to the right. He darted up a few stairs and just caught sight of a black door. Then there was a sharp sound, as of some small latch closing suddenly, after which all was still. Todd ascended the stairs. Curses on them, he muttered. What can they mean by looking in such a manner at my shop? I thought the last time I saw that woman, Rag, that she was cognizant of something. If now she, in her babbling, would give me any news of Tobias, he must be dead. By this time Todd had got to the top of the first flight of stairs and stood upon the landing, close to several open doors, that is to say, outer black heavy-looking doors, and within them were smaller ones, armed with knockers. To the right, he muttered. They went to the right. This must be the door. He paused at one and listened. Not a sound met his ears, and his impatience began to get extreme. That these two women were going to have a conference about him he fully believed, and that he should be so near at hand, and yet not near enough to listen to it, was truly galling. In a few moments it became insupportable. I must and will know what they mean, he said. My threats may wring the truth from them, and if necessary, I should not scruple to silence them both. Dead men tell no tales, so goes the proverb, and it applies equally well to dead women. Todd smiled. He was always fond of a conceit. Yes, he muttered, every circumstance says to me now in audible language, go, 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 and go I will, far away from England. I feel that I have not now many hours to spare. This fracas with Mrs. Lovett expedites my departure wonderfully, and tomorrow's dawn shall not see me in London. But I must ascertain what these women are about. Yes, and I will do so at all risks. A glance showed him that the act of temerity was a safe one. The door opened upon a dingy sort of passage, in which were some mops, pails, and brooms. At its further extremity there was another door, but it was not quite shut, and from the room into which it opened came the murmur of voices. There were other doors right and left, but Todd heeded only that one which conducted to the room inhabited. He crept along the passage at a snail's pace, and then, having achieved a station exactly outside the door, he placed one of his hands behind one of his elephantine-looking ears, and while his countenance looked like that of some malignant demon, he listened to what was going on within that apartment. Martha Jones was speaking. Todd listens and learns a dangerous secret. Todd listens and learns a dangerous secret. It is good, truly, Mrs. Rag, as you may well say, and the glasses sticks to the table when they is left overnight, showing, as Mr. Juggus says, as it's a glutinous quality this ale is. Sticks to the table, said Mrs. Rag. Yes, mum, sticks. But as you was a-saying, well, Martha, in course I know that what goes to you goes no farther. Not a step. And you won't mention it to no one? Not a soul. Another glass. No, no, only one. Nonsense. It don't get into your head. It's as harmless as milk, Mr. Juggus says. But ain't you afeard, Martha, he may come in? Not he, Mrs. Rag. Chambers won't see him again till night. Oh, he's a shocking young man. Well, Mrs. Rag, as you was a-saying, well, it is good. As I was a-saying, Martha, I don't feel uneasy now about Tobias, poor boy, for if ever a poor lad, as was a orphan in a half and half kind of way, seeing that I am his natural mother, and living, and thanking God for the same, and health, leastways, as far as it goes at this present moment of speakin', I, bless me, where was I? At Tobias. Oh, yes, I was at Tobias. As I was saying, if ever a poor body was well provided for, Tobias is. The Colonel. The who? The Colonel, Martha. The Colonel as has took the care of him, and who, sooner or later, will have all the truth out of him about the toddy sween. Who? Who? Bless my poor head, I mean Sweeney Todd. Dear me, what am I thinking of? The barber? Yes, Martha. That horrid barber in Fleet Street, and between you and me, there isn't in all the mortal world a more horrid wretch living than he is. I'm all of a shake. He. Yes. What? He takes folks in and does for M. Kills M? Kills M. What? Why, what? You don't mean to say, why, take another glass, Mrs. Rag. You don't mean to say that Tobias says that Todd the barber is a murderer? My dear Mrs. Rag, take another glass and tell us all about it. Only look at the cream on the top of it. You'll excuse me, Mrs. Jones, but the truth is, I ought not to say more than I have said, and if the Colonel only knew I'd said as much, I can tell you, I think he'd be like a roaring lion. But Tobias is quite a gentleman now, you see, and sleeps in as fine a bed as a nobleman could have for love or money. The Colonel is very good to him, and there never was such a kind good Mrs. Rag began to run over with tears of ale. Bless me, and where does he live? Who? The Colonel. The good, kind Colonel. A dear me, I forget what you said his name was. Geoffrey, and may his end be peace. He will get the reward of all his good actions in another world than this, Martha. Ah, Martha, such men as he can afford to smile at their latter ends. No, I couldn't. Only half a glass. Look at the... No, cream on it. I must go, truly. In course the Colonel, since I have been his cook, knows what cooking is, for though I say it, perhaps as should not, I am a cook, and not a spiler of folks' victuals. Of course what's said goes no further. I know I can trust you, Martha. Oh dear, yes, in course. I'll just put on my shawl and walk a little way with you, Mrs. Rag. Dear me, what is it, Martha? It's a-raining like cats and dogs, it is. Well, I never. What shall you do, Mrs. Rag? What shall you do? Call a coach, I shall, Martha. The last words the Colonel said to me was, Mrs. Rag, rather than there should be any delay in your return, says he, as Tobias may want you, call a coach, and I will pay for it. Todd had only just time to dart down the staircase before the two ladies made their appearance, and then hiding sometimes in doorways, and sometimes behind columns and corners, he dodged them into Fleet Street. A coach was duly called, and Mrs. Rag, by the assistance of Martha Jones, was safely bestowed inside it. Todd heard distinctly the Colonel's address given to the coachman, who would have it twice over, so that he should be sure he had it all right. That will do, said Todd. He darted across the street and made the best of his way to his shop again. He listened at the door for a few moments before he entered, and he thought he heard the sound of weeping. He listened more attentively, and then he was sure someone was sobbing bitterly within the shop. It must be Charlie, thought Todd. He placed his ear quite close to the panel of the door, in the hope that the boy would speak. Todd was quite an adept at listening, but this time he was disappointed, for the sham Charlie Green spoke not one word. Yet the deep sobs continued. Todd was not in the best of tempers. He could stand the delay no longer, and bouncing into the shop, he cried, What the devil is the meaning of all this? What is the meaning of it, you young rascal? I suspect. Yes, sir, said Johanna, looking Todd full in the face, and so do I. You suspect what? That I shall have to have it out, for its aching distracts me. Did you ever have the toothache, sir? The toothache? Yes, sir. It's worse than the heartache, and that I have had. Ah, humph. Any one been? One gentleman, sir, to be shaved. He says he will call again. Very good, very good. Todd took from his pocket the key of the back parlor, that key without which in his own possession he never left the shop, and then, after casting upon Johanna a somewhat sinister and threatening look, he muttered to himself, I suspect that boy. If he refuse to come into the parlor, I will cut his throat in the shop, but if he come in I shall be better satisfied. Charlie, come here. Yes, sir, said Johanna, and she walked boldly into the parlor. Shut the door. She closed it. Humph, said Todd. It is no matter. Chapter LXXXI. Johanna is encouraged. Was Todd satisfied with Johanna's excuse about the toothache? Was he satisfied of the good foible of the supposed Charlie Green by the readiness with which she had come into the parlor? We shall see. If he were not satisfied, he was staggered in his suspicions sufficiently to delay, and delay just then was to Sweeney Todd one of the most fatal things that could be imagined. There are crumbs of consolation under all circumstances. When Johanna was best sent out of the shop, upon the occasion of the visit of Mrs. Lovett to Todd, she had scarcely got a half-dozen steps from the door of the Barber's, when a man in passing her, and without pausing a moment, said, Miss Oakley, be so good as to follow me. Johanna at once obeyed the mandate. The man walked rapidly on until a fruiter's shop was gained, into which he at once walked. Mr. Austin, he said to a man behind the counter, is your parlor vacant? Yes, Sir Richard, and quite at your service, said the fruiter. By this Johanna found that she had made no mistake, and that the person she had followed was no other than Sir Richard Blunt, the magistrate, who was interesting himself so much for her safety, as well as for the discovery of what had befallen Mark and Jestry. The fruiter's parlor was a prettily fitted-up place, where a couple of lovers may in a very romantic manner, if they chose, eat strawberries and cream, and quite enjoy each other's blissful society and whispered nothing the while. Sir Richard handed Johanna a seat as he said, Miss Oakley, I am very much pleased, truly, to have this opportunity of seeing you, and of saying a few words to you. Ah, sir, how much do I owe you? No, Miss Oakley, you owe me nothing. When once I happily become aware of your situation, it becomes my duty as well as my inclination to protect you in every way against what, I am sure you will forgive me for calling your rashness. Call it what you will, sir. Well, Miss Oakley, we will dismiss that part of the subject. Are you going upon any errand, or have you a little time to spare? I have some time. Then it is a very proper thing that you should enjoy it in taking some proper refreshment. I want nothing. No, but you shall have something whether you want it or not, before I say any more to you about Todd and his affairs. Johanna, whose mental excitement had prevented her completely from feeling the amount of exhaustion which otherwise must by that time have come over her, would still have protested that she wanted nothing, but Sir Richard Blunt opened the door of the parlor and called out, Mr. Orton, is your daughter at home? Yes, Sir Richard, Anne is upstairs. Very good. My young friend here can find the way, I dare say. Is it the first floor? Yes. Don't you hear her practicing upon her spinet? The tinkling sounds of a spinet, then all the fashion, came upon their ears, and Sir Richard said to Johanna, Go upstairs, now, to that young lady. She is about your own age, and her father's housekeeper. She will find you something to eat and drink, and then come down to me, as soon as you can. Sir Richard nodded to Mr. Orton, who nodded in return, and then Johanna, seeing that it was all right, ascended the staircase, and guided by the sound of the spinet, soon found herself in a tolerably handsome room, upon the first floor. A young girl with a profusion of chestnut curls hanging down her back was seated at the spinet. Johanna made up to her at once, and throwing her arms round her neck, said, And will you say a kind word to me? The girl gave a slight scream and rose. Well, I'm sure, you impertinent, handsome girl, said Johanna. Boy, faltered Miss Orton. No, girl, added Johanna. Your father sent me to you, and Sir Richard Blunt suggested it. Shall I leave you again? Oh, no, no, said Anne Orton, as she sprang towards Johanna, and kissed her on both cheeks. You are Miss Johanna Oakley. How is it that you know me? My father is an old friend of Sir Richard's, and he has told us all your story. How truly delighted I am to see you. And so you have escaped from that odious Todd, and immediate refreshment, my dear, and all the attention you can cram into a very short space of time to Miss Oakley, my dear, said Mr. Orton, just putting his head so far into the room as to make himself plainly and distinctly heard. Yes, father, yes. How kind you all are, said Johanna. No, no, at least we wish to be. But what I mean is that we are no kinder than we ought to be. My father is so good, I have no mother. And I, too, am motherless. Yes, I heard that Mrs. Oakley lived, you would say, and yet am I motherless. Johanna burst into tears. The sense of desolation that came over the young girl's heart whenever she thought how little of a mother the fanatical personage who owned that title was to her, generally overcame all her firmness, as upon the present occasion. Anne flung her arms around Johanna, and the two young creatures wept in unison. We will leave them to their sacred intercourse. Sir Richard Blunt remained in conversation with Mr. Orton for about a quarter of an hour, and then both Johanna and Anne came downstairs. Johanna looked calmer and happier. Anne had said some kind things to her, such as none but a young girl can say to a young girl. I am ready, said Johanna. Ready for what? Inquired Sir Richard Blunt, with a look of earnest affection in the face of the beautiful heroine, for if ever there were a heroine, we really think Johanna Oakley was one, and we are quite sure that you agree with us. For my mission, said Johanna, I am ready, and can you really find courage to go again to that? Sir Richard could not find a fitting name for Todd's home, but Johanna understood him, and she replied gently, I may not pause now. It is my duty. Your duty? Yes. Oh, Mark, I cannot restore you from the dead, but in the sacred cause of justice I may bring your murderer to the light of day. It is my duty to do so much for your memory. Anne turned aside to hide her tears. Mr. Orton, too, was much affected, and there was an unwonted jar, as though some false note had been struck in voice of Sir Richard Blunt as he spoke, saying, Miss Oakley, I cannot deny that by your going back to Todd's house, you may materially assist in the cause of justice. But yet I advise you not to do so. I know you are all careful of my safety, while Johanna, said Anne, you do not know yet that you are so desolate as to wish to die. Yes, I am desolate, and so, added Sir Richard, because you loved one who has been, according to your judgment upon the circumstances that have come to your knowledge, torn from you by death. You will admit no other ties which could bind you to the world. Is that right? Is it like you? The tones of voice in which these words were uttered, as well as the sentiment embodied in them, sunk deeply into Johanna's heart. Clasping her hands together, she cried, Oh, no, no. Do no think me so inhuman. Do not think me so very ungrateful. Had you forgotten, Arabella Wilmot, had you forgotten your father? No, had you forgotten the brave Colonel Jeffrey? No, I ought not to forget any, when so many have so kindly remembered me, and you too, sir. I ought not, and will not forget you, for you have been a kind friend to me. No, I am nothing. Seek not, sir, to disparage what you have done. You have been all kindness to me. Before he was aware of what she was about, Johanna had seized the hand of Sir Richard Blunt, and for one brief moment touched it with her lips. The good magistrate was sensibly affected. God bless me, said Mr. Orton. Something very big keeps blocking up the whole of my window. They all looked, and as they were silent at that moment, they heard a voice from the street say, Come, my dear, don't set the waterworks a-going. Always remember that easy does it. You come in here and have something to eat, if you won't go home. Lord bless me, what will they think has become of me at the tower? Why, it is Ben, cried Johanna. Ben, said Anne. Who is Ben? Hush. Stop, said Sir Richard, I pray you, stop. Johanna would have rushed out to speak to Ben, who certainly was at the window of the fruiterer's shop, with Arabella Wilmot upon his arm, endeavoring to persuade her to enter, and partake of some refreshment. I will bring him in, said Sir Richard. Retire into the parlor, I beg of you, Miss Oakley, for he will make quite a scene in the shop if you do not. Johanna knew well Ben's affection for her, and doubted not but that, as Sir Richard said, he would not scruple to show it, evening in the open shop, probably to the great edification of the passers-by. She accordingly retired to the parlor with Anne. In a few moments, Sir Richard Blunt ushered in both Ben and Arabella Wilmot. Arabella, with a shriek of joy, rushed into Johanna's arms, and then, with excess of emotion, she fainted. Ben caught up Johanna fairly off her feet, as though he had been dancing some little child, and holding her in a sitting posture upon one arm, he said, Bless you. Easy does it. Easy, I say, does it. Don't you think I'm a-crying? It's a tea-chest has flew in my eye from that grocer's shop opposite. Oh, you little rogue, you. Easy does it. What you have got them, what do you call ems on, have you? The kiss that Ben gave her may have been heard at Sweeney Todd's, and then, when prevailed upon to sit down, he would insist upon holding her fast upon his knee. I must go, said Johanna, and then looking at Arabella, she added, Let me go, before she awakens from her transient forgetfulness to beg me to stay. Ben was furious at the idea of Johanna going back to Todd's, but Sir Richard overruled him, and after some trouble, got him to consent. Then turning to Johanna, he said, The moment night comes on, you will have some visitors, and remember, Miss Oakley, that'sn't. Dunstan's is the watchword. Whoever comes to you with that in his mouth is a friend. I will remember, and now farewell, and God bless and reward you for all your goodness to me. I will live for the many who love me yet, and whom I love in this world. Was it not a world of wonders that amid all this, Johanna did not go mad? Surely something more than mortal strength must have sustained that young and innocent girl in the amid of all these strange events. No human power that she possessed could have possibly prevented her mind from sinking, and the hideous fascinations of an overcharged fancy from breeding rude riot in her brain. But there was a power who supported her, a power which from the commencement of the world has supported many, a power which, while the world continues, will support many more, strengthening the weak and trampling on the strong. The power of love in all the magic of its deep and full intensity. Yes, this was the power which armed that frail and delicate-looking girl with strength to cope with such a man shall we call him? No, we may say such a fiend as Sweeney Todd. If it required no small amount of moral courage to go in the first instance upon the expedition, so fraught with danger, to Todd's shop, what did it require now to enable her to return after having passed through much peril, and tasting the sweets of friendship and sympathy? Surely any heart but Johanna's must have shrunk aghast from ever again evening in thought approaching that dreadful place. And yet she went. Yes, upon her mission of justice she went. To be sure, she was told that as far as human means went, she would be upheld and supported from those without. But what could that assure to her further than that if she fell she should not fall unavenged? Truly, if some higher, some far nobler impulse than that derived from any consciousness that she was looked after had not strengthened her, the girl's spirit must have sunk beneath the weight of many terrors. With a sad smile she once again crossed the threshold of that house, which she now no longer suspected to be the murder's haunt. Chapter LXXI. Todd plans. How she sped with Todd we are already aware. Let us take a peep at the archdemon in that parlor, which he considered his sanctuary, his city of refuge as it were. At least Todd considered it to be such, whether it was or not. He sits at a table, the table beneath which there was no floor, and covering up his face with his huge hands he sets about thinking. Yes, that man now abandons himself to thought as to how he is with a blaze of wickedness to disappear from the scene of his iniquities. It was not remorse that now filled his brain. It was not any feeling of bitter heartfelt regret for what he had done that oppressed him now. No such feeling may possibly find a home in his heart at the hour of success, but now, when he saw and felt that he was surrounded by many difficulties, it had no home in his brain. But yet he thought that they were only difficulties that now surrounded. He did not as yet dream of positive danger. He still reasoned, as you have heard him reason before, namely, that if anything beyond mere suspicion were entertained regarding his mode of life, he would be at once apprehended. He thought that somebody, most likely Colonel Jeffrey, was trying to find out something, and the fact that he, Todd, was there in his own parlor, a free man, appeared to him proof sufficient that nothing was found out. How fallacious! If he had but known that he was virtually in custody evening then, as he, truly, really was, for Fleet Street was alive with officers and the emissaries of the police. If he had but guessed so much for a moment, what a wild tumult would have been raised in his brain. But he knew nothing and suspected little. After a time from generalizing upon his condition, Todd began to be particular, and then he laid down, as it were, one proposition or fact which he intended should be the groundwork of all in other proceedings. That proposition was contained in the words, "Before the dawn of tomorrow I must be off." "That's settled," said Todd, and he gave the table a blow with his hand. "Yes, that's settled." The table creaked ominously, and Todd rose to peep into the shop to see what his boy was doing. Charlie Green, alias Johanna Oakley, was sitting upon a low stool reading a bill that someone had thrown into the shop, and which detailed the merits of some merchandise. How far away from the contents of that bill which she held before her face were her thoughts? "Good," said Todd. "That boy, at all events, suspects nothing, and yet his death is one of the things which had better not be left to chance. He shall fall in the general way of this place." What proper feeling errand boy would wish to survive his master's absence? Of late Todd had not been very profuse in his laughs, but now he came out with one quite of the old sort. The sound startled himself, and he retired to the table again. By the dim light he opened a desk, and supplied himself with writing materials. The twilight was creeping on, and he could only just see. Spreading a piece of paper before him, he proceeded to make a memoranda of what he had to do. It was no bad plan this of Todd's, and the paper, when it was finished, was quite a curiosity in its way. It ran thus: "Mem. To go to Colonel Jeffrey's and by some means get into the house and murder Tobias. Mem. To pack off goods to the wharf where the Hamburg vessel, called the Diana, sails from. Mem. To arrange combustibles for setting fire to the house. Mem. To cut Charlie Green's throat, if any suspicion arise, if not to let him be smothered in the fire. Mem. To have a letter ready to post to Sir Richard Blunt, the magistrate, accusing Mrs. Lovett of her own crimes, and mine likewise." "I think that is all," said Todd. He folded the paper and placed it in his bosom, after which he came out of the parlor into the shop, and called to Johanna. "Charles." "Yes, sir." "Go to the market, and get me a couple of stout porter. I want something carried a short distance." "Yes, sir." Away went Johanna, but before she got halfway down to Fleet Market she met Sir Richard, who said, "What is it?" "He wants a couple of porters to carry something." "Very well, get them." "Depend upon me." "I do, sir. I feel now in good heart to go through with anything, for you are near to me, and I know that I am safe." "You are safe. It will need to be some very extraordinary circumstances, truly, that could compromise you. But go at once for these porters. I and my men will take good care to find where they go to." There was no difficulty in finding parties in abundance at the end of Fleet Market, and Johanna speedily returned, followed by two sturdy fellows. Todd had quite a smile upon his face as he received them. "This way," he said, "this way. I hope you have been lucky today, and have had plenty of work." "No, master," said one, "we haven't, I'm sorry to say." "Truly," added Todd. "Well, I am very glad I have a little job for you. You see these two little boxes. You can carry one each of you, and I will go with you and show you where to. One of the porters raised one of the boxes, and then he gave a long whistle as he said, I say, master, is there penny pieces or paving stones in this here? It's deuced heavy, that it is. And so is this, Bill, said the other. Oh, my eyes, ain't it? There must be 1/4 pound of goose feathers in here. Ha, ha, said Todd. How funny you both are. Funny? Yes, to be sure, but come, this will put strength into you if you had none before. He took a bottle and glass from a cupboard and gave each of the men a full measure of such frightfully strong spirits that they winked again, and the tears came into their eyes as they drank it. Now shoulder the little boxes and come along, he said, and I tell you what I'll do. If you step in here in the evening, and I should happen to be at home, I'll give each of you a shave for nothing, and polish you off in such a manner that you will recollect it as long you live. Thank you, master, thank you. We'll come. One of the porters helped his companion with the chest onto his back and head, and Todd then lent a helping hand with the other. Charlie, he said, I shall be back in 1/4 hour. Away he went, preceding the porter by some 1/2 dozen steps only, but yet ever and soon keeping a wary eye upon the 2 chests, which contained cash and jewels sufficient to found a little kingdom. If he got clear off with those 2 chests only, he felt that he would not give himself much uneasiness about what was left behind. But was Todd going to trust these 2 porters from out his own immediate neighborhood with the secret of the destination of the boxes? No, he was by far too crafty for that. After proceeding some distance, he took them round the unfrequented side of St. Paul's churchyard, and stopping suddenly at the door of a house that was to let, he said, This will do. In here, master. This will do. Put them down. The porters complied, and Todd sat down upon one of the boxes as he said, How much? 1 shilling each of us, master. There's double the money, and now be off, both of you, about your business. The porters were rather surprised, but as they considered themselves sufficiently paid, they made no objection, and walked off with considerable alacrity, leaving Todd and his treasure in the street. Now for a coach, he muttered. Now for a coach. Here, boy, to a ragged boy who was creeping on at some short distance. Earn a penny by fetching me a coach directly. The boy darted off, and in a very few minutes brought Todd a hackney coach. The boxes, too, were got upon it by the united efforts of Todd, the coachman, and the boy, and then, and not till then, did Todd give the correct address of the wharf in Thames Street from which the Hamburg ship was going, and in which he fully intended to embark that night. The ship was advertised to sail at the turn of the tide, which would be about 4 o'clock in the morning. All this did not take long to do. The coach rumbled along Thames Street, but Todd was not aware that Mr. Crotchet had got up behind the vehicle, but such was the fact, and when the lumbering old machine stopped at the wharf, that gentleman got down and felt quite satisfied with the discovery he had made. He's a trying of it on, soliloquized Mr. Crotchet in the bolting line, but it ain't no manner of a go. He'll swing, and he can't help it. If he were to book himself to the moon, and there was a coach or ship as went all the way, and no stoppages. Mem, said Todd to himself, to go to Colonel Jeffreys and murder Tobias, ha. Lor, said the coachman, was that you, sir? What do you mean? Why, as made that horrid sort of noise. Mind your business, my friend, and tell me if you can take me quickly to Islington, for I have no time to lose. Like the wind, sir. You can go with these here osses, replied the coachman. Did you ever see sich bits o' blood, sir? One on M's blind, and t'other on M is deaf, which is advantages as you don't get in one pair. Advantages? Lor bless you, yes, sir. The blind un goes unknown quick, 'cause you sees, sir, he thinks he's only in some dark place, and in course he wants to get out on it as soon as he can. Truly, yes, sir, and the deaf un, he goes quick too, 'cause as he hears nothink, he thinks as there never was sich a quiet place as he's goes, and he does it out o' feeling and gratitude, sir, yer sees. Be quick then, and charge your own price. Todd sprang into the vehicle, and stimulated by the idea of charging his own price, the coachman certainly did make the bits of blood do wonders. And in quite an incredibly short space of time, Todd found himself in the immediate neighborhood of the colonel's house. It was now getting dark, but that was what he wished. Chapter LXXI. Todd visits the colonel. Well, Tobias, said Colonel Jeffrey, as he entered the pretty, cheerful room into which the now convalescent boy had been removed. Well, Tobias, how are you now? Much better, sir. Oh, sir, what would you say? I feel that when I see you, sir, I ought to say so much to convince you of how truly and deeply grateful I am to you, and yet I can scarcely ever say a word about it. I pray for your happiness, sir. Truly I do. Your name and my mother's and Minna Gray's are always uttered to God by me. Now, Tobias, said Colonel Jeffrey gravely, I am quite satisfied that as regards all that has passed, you feel as you ought to feel, and for my own part, I beg you to feel and to know that your saying anything about it only distresses me. Distresses you, sir? Yes, it does, truly. I see your eyes are upon the door. You expect Minna, today, I am sure. Yes, sir. My mother was to bring her, sir. A ringing at a bell now came upon Tobias's ear, and his color went, and came fitfully. You are still very weak, my poor boy, said the colonel, but you are certainly much improved. Do you feel any confusion in your head now? None at all, only when I think of Todd suddenly, ever it makes me feel cold and sick, and something seems to rush through my heart. Oh, that will go away. That is nothing. There, I will draw up the blind for you. The evening is coming, and the sky is overclouded. You can see better now, and there is one coming whom I know you wish to lose no sight of. I hear her foot upon the stairs, said Tobias. Do you? It is more than I do. Ah, sir, the senses are sharpened, I think, by illness. Not so much as by love. Tobias, do you hear her footstep now? Yes, and it is like music. He had his head on one side in an attitude of listening, and then with joy sparkling from every feature of his face, he spoke again. She comes, she comes. Ah, she comes fast. My own, my beautiful, she comes. This is real love, said the colonel, and he stepped from the room. Nearly on the landing at the head of the stairs, he met Minna Gray. Welcome, he said as he held out his hand to her. You will find your young friend up and much better. Minna could only look her thanks. Mrs. Ragg was following her, and as the ascent of stairs was always rather a task to that good lady, she was making a noise like a stranded grampus in breathing. Ah, Colonel, she said, young legs get upstairs faster than old ones, sir, as you see. Well, there was a time when first I knew poor dear Ragg, who is of course dead and gone, quite premature. Exactly, Mrs. Ragg, said the colonel as he rapidly descended the stairs. Did you ever, my dear, know such a strange man? Said Mrs. Ragg to Minna, who, the colonel, to be sure, so soon as I begin to tell him any little what do you call it? No, it ain't nanny goat. That's ridiculous. It's, what is it? Anecdote, do you mean, Mrs. Ragg? Yes, to be sure. Well, as I was a-saying, no sooner do I begin telling him a little nanny-goat, no, I mean anecdote, than off he is like a shot. Minna smiled to herself, and she was far from wondering that the colonel was off like a shot, for well she knew that when Mrs. Ragg did begin anything concerning the late Mr. Ragg, it usually lasted 3/4 of an hour at the very least. Minna, called Tobias. I'm here, Tobias. In another moment she was in the room. Truly it was a pleasant thing to see the face of Tobias, when his sunshine, as he called Minna, came close to him, and in her soft voice asked him if he was better. Don't mind me, said Mrs. Ragg. I am going to darn a stocking or two, that's all. Just say what you both like. Young folks will be young folks. Bless me, I recollect just as if it were only yesterday, when I used to speak to poor departed Mr. Rag, who is premature, dead and gone, in a manner of speaking. Ah, dear me, how the world goes round and round, round and round, continually. Tobias and Minna were so well accustomed to the garrulity of Mrs. Rag, and so well aware that she required no answer, that they let her talk on, and did not mind her, as she requested they would not, and so the evening grew apace, and the light gradually began to wane, as those two young loving hearts spoke together of the future, and indulged in that daydream of happiness which can only belong to youth and love. Todd is skulking round the angle of the garden wall, from which he can get a view of the colonel's house, and yet not be seen himself. The more he looked, the more the desire grew upon him, notwithstanding the immense risk he ran of personal detection by so doing, to get into the house and finish the career of poor Tobias. He would have had no particular objection rather to have taken the life of Mrs. Rag, if it could be easily and comfortably done. It has been said that there are folks in the world who never forgive anyone for doing them a kindness, and such paradoxical views of human nature have been attempted to be laid down as truths. But whether this be so or not, is still to be proved, although it is certain that nothing stirs the evil passions of men who will inflict injury upon the innocent, as to find themselves baffled in their villainy. From that moment the matter becomes a personal affair of vengeance. Therefore, since Todd had become thoroughly aware that Tobias had escaped from the death he had intended for him at the madhouse, his rage against the boy knew no bounds. Truly, the reader will conclude that it must have been a feeling of no ordinary strength that, at such a busy and ticklish time, would take Todd to the colonel's house at all. It was revenge, bitter, uncompromising revenge. Now, you must know the colonel's house was one of those half-villa, half-mansion-like residences that are so common in the neighborhood of London. There was a kind of terrace in the front, and a garden with flowering shrubs that had a pretty enough appearance, and which at night afforded abundance of shelter. It was by this front garden that Todd hoped to reach the house. When it was nearly dark, he slunk in, crouching down among the trees and shrubs, and crawling along like a serpent as he was. He soon came to a flight of stone steps that led to the kitchens. By the time Todd had got thus far, some of her domestic duties had called Mrs. Rag to the lower part of the house. He saw by the firelight that someone was going about the kitchen, close to the foot of the stone steps, but he could not exactly, by that dim and uncertain radiance, take upon himself to say that it was Mrs. Rag. She soon lit a candle, though, and then all was clear. He saw the good lady preparing divers lights for the upper rooms, while Todd was halfway down the stone steps, peeping into the kitchen. One of the other servants of the house came into that receptacle for culinary articles, and commenced putting on a bonnet and shawl. Todd could not hear one word of what was said by Mrs. Rag and this young woman, who was getting ready to go out, but he saw them talk, and by their manner he felt convinced that it was only upon ordinary topics. If the young woman left the house by the steps upon which Todd was, and which it was more than likely she would do, his situation would be anything but a pleasant one, and discovery would be certain. To obviate the chance of this, he stepped back and crouched down in among the shrubs in the garden. He was not wrong in his conjectures, for in a few moments the servant who was going out ascended the steps and passed him so closely that by stretching out his hand he could, if he had been so minded, have touched her dress. In a short time she was out of earshot. Todd emerged from his concealment again and crept down the steps and once more peeped into the kitchen. Mrs. Rag was still busy with the candles. He was just considering what he should do when he heard the tramp of horses' feet in the road above. He descended sufficient of the steps to enable himself to get a peep at what was going on. He saw a groom well mounted and leading another horse, then no other than Colonel Geoffrey himself, although he did not of his own knowledge feel assured that it was him, come out at the front door of the house and mounted. "Now, William," said the colonel, "we must ride sharply." "Yes, sir," said the groom. Another moment and they were gone. "This is lucky," said Todd. "It is not likely that there is any other room in the house, and if not, I have the game in my own hands. He crept down the remainder of the stone steps and placed his ear quite close to the kitchen window. Mrs. Rag was enjoying a little conversation to herself. Ah, she said, it's always the way, girls will be girls, but what I blame her for is that she don't ask the colonel's leave at once and say, sir, your disorderly has won my infections, and may he come here and take a cup of tea. This was Greek to Todd. What is the old fool talking about? He muttered. But I will soon give her a subject that will last for her life. He now arrived at the door of the kitchen. It was very unlikely to be locked or otherwise fastened, so immediately after the young woman who had left the house and passed so close to him, Todd. Yet he listened for a few moments more as Mrs. Rag kept making observations to herself. Listeners hear no good of themselves, says the proverb, and at all events it was verified in this instance. Laura Mussy, ejaculated Mrs. Rag, how my mind do run upon that horrid old ugly monster of a Todd today. Well, I do hope I shall never look upon his frightful face again, and how awful he did squint, too. Dear me, what did the colonel say he had with his vision? Could it be a something a fixity? No, that isn't it. Obliquity, said Todd, popping his head in at the kitchen door. It was obliquity, and if you scream or make the least alarm, I'll skin you and strew this kitchen with your mangled remains. Mrs. Rag sank into a chair with a melodramatic groan that would have made her fortune over the water in domestic tragedy if she could have done it so naturally. Todd kept his eye upon her, that basilisk-like eye, which had fascinated the good woman often, and this time it acted as a kind of spell, for truly may he have said, or rather may someone have said for him, he held her with his glittering eye. Todd's first care now was to get between Mrs. Rag and the kitchen door, lest upon some sudden impulse she should rise and flee. Then he folded his arms, and looked at her calmly, and with such a devilish smile as may have become Mephistopheles himself, while contemplating the ruin of a soul. He took from his pocket a razor. Mercy, gasped Mrs. Rag, where is Tobias? Todd horrifies Mrs. Rag. Todd horrifies Mrs. Rag. Upstairs. Back room, second floor, looking into the garden. Alone? No, Minna Gray is with him. Listen to me. If you stir from here until I come to you again, I will not only murder you, but Tobias likewise, and every one whom I meet within this house. You know me, and can come to some opinion as to whether or not I am a man likely to keep my word. Remain where you are, move not, speak not, and all will be well. Mrs. Rag slowly slid off her chair and fell to the floor of the kitchen, where she lay, in what seemed a swoon. That will do as well, said Todd as he glanced at her, and yet as I return. He made a movement with his hand across his throat to indicate what he would do, and then feeling assured that he had little or, truly, no opposition to expect in the house, he left the kitchen and walked upstairs. When he reached the top of the kitchen stairs he paused to listen. All was very still in the house. It is well, he said, it is well. This deed of blood shall be done, and long before it can be thought that it was I who struck the blow, I shall be gone. Alas, after passing through so much, after being pursued in so almost a miraculous manner from the murderous intentions of Todd, backed by the cupidity of Fogg, and his subordinate Watson, was poor Tobias yet to die a terrible death as a victim to the cruel passions of his relentless persecutor? No, we will not yet believe that such is to be the fate of poor honest Tobias, although at the present time his prospects look gloomy. Todd may, and no doubt has taken as worthy lives, but we will hope that the hand of Providence will prevent him from taking this one. He reached the landing of the first floor, and he paused to listen again. He thought this time that he heard the faint sound of voices above, but he was not quite sure. Otherwise all was quiet. This was a critical situation for Todd. If any one who was a painter of pictures or of morals had but seen him, Sweeney Todd, as he there stood, they would no longer have doubted either that there was a devil or that some persons in this world were actuated by a devilish fiend. He looked the incarnate fiend. The Mephistopheles of the imagination, such as he is painted by the German enthusiast. His laugh, too, was not that satanic. He set himself to listen to the voices that he heard in that quiet rooms, and the sounds, holy and full of affection as they were, awakened no chord of answering feeling in that bold, bad man's breast. He stood apart from human nature, a solitary being, a wreck upon the ocean of society, none loving, and by none beloved. Who would be Sweeney Todd for all the wealth, real or fabled, of a million Californias? He is here, he said. I know his voice. Tobias is here. Ah, he mentions the name of God. Ha! He is more fitting to go to that heaven he can talk of so glibly, but there is none. There is none. No, no, all that is a fable. Of course Todd could not believe in a divinity of goodness and mercy. Chapter LXXAI, Tobias in Jeopardy. And so you do love me, Minna, said Tobias. How his voice shook like a reed swayed by the wind, and yet what a world of melody was in it. Can you ask me to say yes? Was the reply of the fair young creature by his side. Can you ask me to say yes, Tobias? It seems to me, said Tobias, as though it would be such a joy to hear you say so, Minna, and yet I will not ask you. How well you have got, Tobias. Your cheek has got its old color back again. The color it had long before you knew there was such a man as Sweeney Todd in the world. Your eyes are bright too, and your voice has its old pleasant sound. Used it to be pleasant to you, Minna? She held up her hand and shook her head laughingly. No questions, Tobias. No questions. I will confess nothing. Stop, said Tobias, as he put himself into an attitude of listening. What was that? I thought I heard something. It was like a suppressed growl. I wish the colonel would come home. Did you not hear it, Minna? Minna had heard it, but she did not say she had. Where did it come from, Tobias? From the stairhead, Minna. Oh, it is some accidental noise, such as is common to all houses, and such as always defy conjecture and explanation, and being nothing and meaning nothing, always comes to nothing. Yet I will go and see. Perhaps a door has been left open, and is banging to and fro by the wind, and if so it will only vex you to hear it again, Tobias. It was Todd, who upon hearing the soft and tender speeches from the young lovers, had not been able to suppress a growl, and now that he had heard Minna Gray talk of coming to look what it was, he felt the necessity of instantly concealing himself somewhere. It was not likely she would come down the stairs, so Todd adopted an original mode of keeping himself out of sight. He descended steps sufficient that by laying at full length along them, his head did not reach the top, and in the darkness he then considered that he should be quite safe from the casual glance that in all likelihood merely to satisfy Tobias, Minna would give outside the room door. Todd thought by her manner she had heard nothing. No, no, Minna, said Tobias, there is no occasion. It is nothing, I dare say, and I don't like you to be out of my sight a moment. It is only a moment. She rose and proceeded to the door. An unknown feeling of dread, she knew not why, was at the heart of Minna. Certainly the slight sound she had heard, and that too in the house of Colonel Jeffrey, was not sufficient to warrant such a feeling, and yet there, at her heart, it sat brooding. She stood for a moment at the door. It was only for a moment. How foolish I am, she thought, and then she passed out onto the landing, where she stood for a moment glancing round her. It is nothing, Minna, called out Tobias, or shall I try and come? I feel quite strong enough to do so. Oh, no, no, it is nothing. Minna stepped lightly back and sat down. She clasped her hands very tight truly together, and then placed both upon her breast. She had seen Todd. Yes, Minna Gray had seen the man that had been, and who was for all she knew to the contrary still to be, the bane of Tobias's existence. The clear eyes of youth had noticed the lumbering figure as it lay upon the stairs before them, and she did not scream, she did not cry for help, she did not faint. She only crept back as we have seen, and held her hands upon her heart, and looked at Tobias. There was no mistaking Todd. Once seen he was known forever. Like some hideous picture, there dwelt the memory of Sweeney Todd upon the young imagination of the fair Minna Gray. Once before, a long time ago, so it seemed to her, she had seen him in the temple skulking up an old staircase. From that moment the face was daguerreotyped upon her brain. It was never to be forgotten, and with the face comes the figure too, that she saw upon the stairs. Alas, poor Min! And so it was nothing but one of those odd accidents that will occur in defiance of all experience and calculation, said Tobias. Just that, replied Minna. Ah, my dear Minna, we are so safe here. It always seems to me as though the very air of this house, belonging as it does to such a man, so full of goodness as the Colonel is, such that nothing very bad could live in it for long. I hope so. I think so. What a calm and pleasant evening it is, Tobias. Did you see the new book of the seasons, so full of pretty engravings in the shape of birds and trees and flowers, that the Colonel has purchased? New book? Yes, it lies in his small study, upon this floor. I will fetch it for you, if you wish it, Tobias. No, I will go. You are still weak. Remain in peace upon the couch, dear Tobias, and I will go for you. Before she left the room, she kissed the forehead of the boy. A tear, too, fell upon his hand. Who knows, she thought, that I shall ever see him in life again? Minna, you weep, weep. No, no, I'm so happy. She hastily left the room. Todd had heard what had passed, and had turned to hide himself again. The young girl knew that she passed the murderer within a hair's breadth. She knew that he had but to stretch out his right hand and say, Minna Gray, you are my victim. And his victim she would have become. Was not that dreadful? And she so young and so fair, so upon the threshold, as it were, of the garden of her existence, so loving and so well beloved. She felt for a moment as she crossed the landing, just for a moment, as though she were going mad. But the eye of the Omnipotent was upon that house. She staggered on. She made her way into a bedroom. It was the Colonel's. Above the mantel shelf, supported on a small bracket, was a pair of pistols. They were of a large size, and she had heard from the current gossip of the house how they were always loaded, and how the servants feared to touch them, and how evening they shrank from making the bed, lest the pistol from some malice aforethought, or from something incidental to such watching, should go off at once of their own accord, and inevitably shoot whoever chanced to be in the room. Minna Gray laid her hand upon the dreaded weapons. For Tobias, she gasped. Then she paused to listen. All was still as the grave. Todd was not yet ready for the murder, or he wished to take their lives both together and in the one room. That was more probable. Then she began to think that he must have some suspicion, and that it was necessary upon her part to do something more than merely make no alarm. The idea of singing occurred to her. It was a childish song that she had been taught, when a pretty child, that she now warbled forth a few lines of, If I were a forest bird, I'd shun the noisy town, I'd seek the verdure of the spring, the dear autumnal brown, and evening when the winter came, by sunny skies bereft, I'd sleep in some deep distant cave, which wanton winds had left. She crossed the landing. Minna, said Tobias, my Minna, I come. She passed into the room, and the moment she crossed the threshold, she turned her face to it and presented both the pistols before her. Then, as she wound, inch by inch, into the center of the room, all her power of further concealment of her feelings deserted her, and she could only say, in a strange choking tone, Todd, Todd, Todd. No, 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 oh, God, no, cried Tobias. Todd, Todd, Todd. No, no, help, help. D.N., said Sweeney Todd as he dashed open the door of the chamber and stood upon the threshold with a glittering knife in his right hand. Hold, shrieked Minna Gray. Another step, murderer, and I send you to your God. Todd waited. He could almost see down the barrels of the large pistols, which a touch of the young girl's finger would explode in his face. With a sharp, convulsive cry, Tobias fell to the floor. The blood gushed from his mouth, and he lay bereft of sensation. Heroic conduct of Minna Gray. Heroic conduct of Minna Gray. Away, cried Minna. Monster, away. Another moment, and as heaven hears me, I will fire. Once, twice, Todd darted to the stair head, but he darted away again quicker than he had gone there, for who, to his horror, should he meet, advancing with great speed up the steps, but Mrs. Rag, who had managed to get out of the kitchen, and who bore, as a weapon of offense and defense, the large kitchen poker, which was of a glowing red heat. Todd caught a touch of it on his face. "Oh, you villain of the world," cried Mrs. Rag, "I'll teach you to come here murdering people. My poor Tobias is no more, I know, but I'll take the law of you, I will. Murder, murder, police, Colonel," with an alacrity that was far beyond to all appearance Mrs. Rag's powers. That good lady pursued Todd with the red-hot poker. He dared not take refuge in Tobias's room, for there stood Minna with the pistols in her hand, so he darted up the first flight of stairs he saw, which led to the top of the house. Mrs. Rag pursued him, but when she got to the head of the stairs, Minna pressed too hard upon the hair trigger of one of the pistols, and off it went. Mrs. Rag fully believed herself shot, and rolled down the stairs, poker included, while Todd, laboring under the impression that the shot was at him, became still more anxious to find some place of refuge. Upon the landing, which he was not a moment in reaching, he found a great show of doors, for he was, in fact, upon the floor from which all the sleeping rooms of the servants opened. It was quite a chance that the first one he bounced into was one that had in the roof a little square trapdoor, facetiously called a fire escape, but which, in the event of a fire, would have acquired the agility of a harlequin and the coolness of a tax-gatherer to get through. Todd dragged a bedstead beneath the trap, and then his great height enabled him to thrust it open and project his head through it. He found that part of his corporality was in the roof, as it were, that is to say, in the cavity between the ceiling of the room and the house. A trapdoor of somewhat larger size in the actual roof opened to the air. Todd dragged himself through, and was fairly upon the top of the Colonel's house. A slippery elevation, but surely that was better than facing a red-hot poker and a pair of hair-trigger dueling pistols, and so, for a time, the desire to escape kept down every other feeling. Evening his revengeful thoughts gave way to the great principle of self-preservation, and Todd was only intent upon safely getting away. He glared round him upon the night sky and a gaudy assemblage of chimney-tops. What was he to do? In a minute he uttered a string of such curses as we cannot very well here set down, and he turned preternaturally calm and still. "Shall I go back," he said, "or escape?" He heard the tramp of horses' feet, and peeping carefully over the front parapet of the house, he saw Colonel Jeffrey arrive on horseback and dismount. His groom led the horse away, and the colonel ascended the steps. Then, and not until then, Todd made up his mind. "Escape," he said, "and be off." There was a long sloping part of the roof close to where he was, and he thought that if he slid down that very carefully he should be able to get onto the roof of the next house, and so perhaps through their trapdoor, and by dint of violence or cunning, or both united, reach the street. It was a desperate resource, but his only one. The top part of the long sloping roof was easily gained, and then Todd began to let himself down very carefully. But the angle of the roof was greater than he had imagined, and by the time he got about halfway down he found a dangerous and most uncomfortable acceleration of motion ensuing. It was in vain he tried to stop himself. Down he went with a speed into the gutter behind the coping stone, that left him lying there for a few moments half stunned, and scarcely conscious if he were safe or not. The colonel's house, however, was stoutly built, and Todd's weight had not displaced anything, so that there he lay safe enough, wedged into a narrow rain gutter, from which, when he did recover himself sufficiently to make the attempt, he found some difficulty in wrenching himself out of. Sore and shaken, Todd now looked about him. He was close to the roof of the next door house. Chapter Alexexive. Todd's wonderful escape. The step was but a trifle, and yet, shaken as Todd was by his fall, it really seemed to him to be one of the most hazardous and nervous things in the world to take it. He made 2 feints before he succeeded. At length he stood fairly upon the roof of the adjoining house. He did not say, "Thank God." Such words were not exactly in the vocabulary of Sweeney Todd, but he wiped the perspiration from his brow, and seemed to think that he had effected something at last. And yet how far was he from safety? It is some satisfaction to have got such a man as Todd upon the housetops. Who pities him? Who would be violently afflicted if he made a false step and broke his neck? No one, we apprehend, but such men, somehow, do not make false steps, and if they do, they manage to escape the consequences. Surely it was about as ticklish a thing to crawl up a sloping roof as to come down one. Todd did not think so, however, and he began to shuffle up the roof of the house he was now on, looking like some gigantic tortoise, slowly making its way. Reasoning from his experience of the colonel's house, Todd thought he should very well be able to pitch upon the trap in the roof of the domicile upon which he was, nor was he wrong. He found it in precisely the same relative position, and then he paused. He drew a long breath. "What a mad adventure this is," he said, "and yet what a satisfaction it would have been to me, before I left England, to be able to feel that I had had my revenge upon that brat Tobias, that he had not altogether failed me after I had paid so much money to be rid of him. But that is over. I have failed in that attempt, but they shall not say it cost me my life. They will be bold people who stop me in my passage to the street in this house." He felt the trap door. It was fast. "Humph," he said, "doors are but bonds, and the rains of a few winters rot them quickly enough. We shall see." The knife, with which he would have been well pleased to give poor Tobias his quietus, was thick and strong. He slid it under the wooden trap, and by mere force lifted it up. The nails of the bolt easily withdrew themselves from the rotten wood. Todd was right. The rains of a few winters had done their work. It was not exactly a time in the evening, when, in such a class of house, anyone may be expected to be found in the attics, so Todd made no scruple of at once removing the lower trap in the ceiling. He dropped comfortably enough onto the floor, and now, coming suddenly as he did from the light, faint as it was, of the open air in the room, which he found himself, seemed to be involved in profound darkness, but that he knew would wear away in a few moments, and he stood still for his eyes to get accustomed to the semi-obscurity of the place. Gradually, then, as though out of chaos, there loomed a bedstead and all the necessary appointments of a bedroom. It was untenanted, and so Todd, after listening intently and believing, from the marked stillness that there prevailed, that the upper part of the house was deserted, walked to the door, and opening it, stood upon the landing. "If I can now but step downstairs noiselessly and open the street door, all will be well. People don't sit upon the staircase, and I may be fortunate enough to encounter no one." There was no time to lose. Affairs in Fleet Street required his presence, and besides, the present moment may be the most propitious, for all he knew, for the enterprise. Down he went, not clinging to the balustrades, for who should say they may not wheeze and creak? Not walking upon the middle of the stairs, for there was no saying what telltale sounds they may give vocality to, but sliding along close to the wall, and stepping so quietly that it would have required attentive ears to have detected his silent and steady march. And so, flight by flight of these stairs Todd descended in safety until he reached the passage. Yes, he got to the passage without the shadow of an interruption. Then he heard voices in one of the parlors. "Confound them," said Todd. "They will hear me open the street door to a certainty, but it must be done." He crept up to the door. There was some complicated latch upon it that defied all his knowledge of latches, and all his perseverance, and yet, no doubt, it was something that only required a touch, but he may be hours in finding out in the dark where to apply that touch. He still heard the voices in the parlor. More than 5 minutes, precious minutes to him, had already been consumed in fumbling at the lock of the street door, and then Todd gave it up as useless, and he crept to the parlor door to listen to the speakers, and so, perhaps, ascertain the force that was within. A female voice was speaking. "Oh, dear me, yes, I dare say," it said. "You no doubt think that house can be kept for nothing, and that a respectable female wants no clothes to her back, but I can tell you, Mr. Simmons, that you will find yourself wonderfully mistaken, sir. Pshaw, said a man's voice. Pshaw, I know what I mean, and so do you. You be quiet, wife, and think yourself well off, that you are as you are. Well off, yes, to be sure, well off. Well off, when I was forced to go to Mr. Rickup's party in the same dress they saw me in last Easter. Oh, you brute, what's the matter with the dress? The matter? Why, I'll tell you what the matter is. The matter is, and the long and short of everything, that you are a brute. Very conclusive, truly. The deuce take me if it ain't. I suppose by the deuce you mean the devil, Mr. Simmons, and if he don't take you some day, he won't of his own. Ha, ha, you may laugh, but there's many a true word spoken in jest, Mr. Simmons. Oh, you are in jest, are you? No, sir, I am not, and I should like to know what woman could jest with only one black silk and that turned. Yes, Mr. Simmons, you often call upon the deuce to take this and to take that. Mind he don't come some day to you when you least expect it, sir, and say, "Lend me a light," said Todd, popping his awfully ugly face right over the top of the half-open door, a feat which he was able to accomplish by standing on his tiptoes. There are things that can be described, but certainly the consternation of Mr. and Mrs. Simmons cannot be included in the list. They gazed upon the face of Todd in speechless horror, nor did he render himself a bit less attractive by several of his most hideous contortions of visage. Finding then that both husband and wife appeared spellbound, Todd stepped into the room, and taking a candle from the table, he stalked into the passage with it. The light in his hand threw a light upon the mystery of the lock. Todd opened the street door and passed out in a moment. To hurl the candle and candlestick into the passage and close the door was the next movement of Todd. But then he saw two figures upon the steps leading to Colonel Jeffrey's house, and he shrunk back a moment. "Now, William," said Colonel Jeffrey himself, "you will take this letter to Sir Richard Blunt, and tell him to use his own discretion about it." "Yes, sir. Be quick, and give it into no hands but his own." "Certainly, sir. Remember, William, this is important." The groom touched his hat and went away at a good pace, and Colonel Jeffrey himself closed the door. "Truly," muttered Todd, "truly, so Sir Richard Blunt, who is called an active magistrate, is to know of my little adventure here. Well, well, we shall see." He darted from the door of the house, through which he had made so highly successful and adventurous a progress, and pursued William with such strides as soon brought him close up to him. But the thoroughfare in which they were was too public a one for Todd to venture upon any overt act in it. He followed William sufficiently closely, however, to be enabled to take advantage of any opportunity that may present itself to possess himself by violence of the letter. Now William had been told the affair was urgent, so of course he took all the nearest cuts he could to the house of Sir Richard Blunt, and such a mode of progress soon brought him into a sufficiently quiet street for Todd's purpose. The latter looked right and left. He turned completely round, and no one was coming. A more favorable opportunity could not be. Stepping lightly up to William, he by one heavy blow upon the back of his neck felled him. The groom lay insensible. Todd had seen him place the colonel's letter in his breast pocket, and at once he dived his huge hand into that receptacle to find it. He was successful. One glance at the epistle that he drew forth sufficed to assure him that it was the one he sought. It was duly addressed to Sir Richard Blunt, with speed and private. "Truly, very private," said Todd. "Wretch, wretch!" cried someone from a window, and Todd knew then that the deed of violence had been witnessed by someone from one of the houses. With an execration, he darted off at full speed, and soon placed a perfect labyrinth of streets between him and all pursuit. He thrust the letter all crumbled up into his pocket, and he would not pause to read it until he was much nearer to Fleet Street than to the colonel's house, or the scene of his attack upon the groom. Then, by the light of a more than usually brilliant lamp, which with its expiring energies was showing the world what an old oil lamp could do, he opened and read the brief letter. It was as follows. Dear Sir Richard, Todd has been here upon murderous thoughts intent. Poor Tobias has, I fear, broken a blood vessel, and is in a most precarious condition. I leave all to you. The villain escaped, but is injured, I think. Yours very faithfully, John Jeffrey. To Sir Richard Blunt. Broken a blood vessel, said Todd. Ha, broken a blood vessel. Ha. Then Tobias may yet be food for worms, and the meat of the pretty crawlers to the banquet. Ha! He walked on with quite a feeling of elation, and yet there was, as he came to think, a something, he could not exactly define what, about the tone of the letter, that began upon second thoughts to give him no small share of uneasiness. The familiar way in which he was mentioned as Todd merely, without further description, argued some foregone conclusion. It seemed to say, Todd, the man whom we both know so well and have our eyes upon. Did it mean that? A cold perspiration broke out upon the forehead of the guilty wretch. What was he to think? What was he to do? He read the letter again. It sounded much more unmeaning and strange now. He had at first been too much dazzled by the pleasant intelligence regarding Tobias to comprehend fully the alarming tone of the epistle, but now it waked upon his imagination, and his brain soon became vexed and troubled. Off, and away, he muttered. Yes, I must be off before the dawn. The interception of this letter saves me for some few hours. In the morning, the colonel will see Sir Richard Blunt, and then they will come to arrest me, but I shall be upon the German Ocean by then. Yes, the Hamburg ship for me. He was so near his home now that it was not worth while to call a coach. He could run to Fleet Street quicker. So off he set at a great pace till his breath failed him. Then he held on to a post so faint and weak that a little child may have apprehended him. Curse them all, he said. I wish they all had but one throat, and I a knife at it. All who cross me, I mean. Time was rather an important element now in Todd's affairs, and he felt that he could not allow himself a long period evening to recover from the state of exhaustion in which he was. After a few minutes' rest, he pushed on. One of those sudden changes that the climate of this country is subject to now took place, and although the sky had looked serene and bright, and there had been twinkling stars in the blue firmament but a short time before, Todd began to find that his clothing was but little protection against the steady rain that commenced falling with a perseverance that threatened something lasting. All is against me, he said. All is against me. He struggled on with the rain dashing in his face and trickling, despite all his exertions to the contrary, down his neck. Suddenly he paused, and laid his finger upon his forehead, as though a sudden thought of more than ordinary importance had come across his mind. The turpentine, he said. The turpentine, confound it, I forget the turpentine. What this may mean was one of Todd's own secrets, but before he went home, he ran down several streets until he came to a kind of wholesale drug warehouse. He rang the bell violently. What is it? Said a voice. The small keg of turpentine that was to be sent to Mr. Todd's in Fleet Street is particularly wanted. It was sent about half an hour ago. Oh, thank you. That will do. Chapter LXXXV. Sir Richard Makes Plans. Johanna had had a long time to herself in Todd's shop now. When first he left upon that expedition of murder, she had almost been afraid to stir, for she had feared he may momentarily return. But as his stay became longer and longer protracted, she plucked up courage. She began to look about her. As yet, she said to herself, what has been done towards arriving at a solution of the mysteries of this dreadful place? The more she thought, the more she felt compelled to answer this inquiry in an unsatisfactory manner. What had been done? The only thing that could be said to be settled was the fact that Todd was guilty and that Mrs. Lovett was his accomplice. That he, by some diabolical means, murdered people who came into his shop to be shaved was a fact incontestable, but how he did the deed still remained a mystery. The care, which Todd always bestowed for the purpose of concealing the manner in which he committed the murder, had hitherto been successful. No one but himself, and probably Mrs. Lovett, knew exactly how he did the deed. It has been, of course, sufficiently observed that he never attempted anything amiss when two people were in the shop, that he'd always made it a point to get rid of Johanna upon occasions when he thought he had a chance of making a victim, and that in fact he had, by the very fact that Sir Richard Blunt and his officers had in various disguises followed people into his shop, been for some time prevented from the commission of his usual murders. Now, without in the smallest degree disguising what he did know, it is quite clear that Sir Richard Blunt up to that time did not know how Todd did the deeds of blood for which his shop was to become famous, and himself infamous. That people went in and never came out again was about the extent of what was really known. The authorities, including Sir Richard Blunt, were extremely anxious to know exactly how these murders were committed, and therefore they waited with the hope that something would occur to throw a light upon that part of the subject before they apprehended Todd. At any moment, of course, he could have been seized, and he little suspected that he was upon such a mine. If anything, however, could be said to expedite the arrest of Todd, it would certainly be what had taken place at the Colonel's house. Now, to all appearance, when the Colonel came home so close upon the events that had happened in his absence and had so very nearly been fatal to both Minna Grey and Tobias, Todd had made his escape. A rapid but effective search of the Colonel's house, sufficed to prove that there he was not. The appearance of Tobias, with blood gushing from his mouth, was sufficiently alarming, and it was under the impression that he was dying from the rupture of a blood vessel that the Colonel wrote the note to Sir Richard Blunt, which was intercepted by Sweeney Todd himself. Upon the arrival, however, of the surgeon, who was immediately sent for, it was soon ascertained that the blood vessel which had given way in poor Tobias was not on the lungs, and that the danger arising from it was by no means great, provided he were kept quiet and properly attended to. Minna Grey received this information with deep thankfulness, and the Colonel, upon hearing it, immediately sought Sir Richard to consult with him upon the subject in its now altered state, for the idea that Tobias was dying had made him, the Colonel, view the affair much more passionately than prudently. By dint of some trouble, the Colonel found Sir Richard Blunt, and then to his no small surprise, for he had known his groom long, and thought he could thoroughly depend upon him, he found that the magistrate had received no note at all upon the subject, so that of course no steps had been taken. Upon hearing the affair detailed to him, Sir Richard Blunt said, "I regret this much, as it will put Todd in a fright and expedite his departure." But was he not going by the Hamburg packet before day dawn? At any rate, I understood you that by the manner in which you had dogged him, you had thoroughly ascertained that fact. I had, but had taken steps to prevent him. You would arrest him tonight? No, I do not think it advisable to arrest him just yet. The fact is, I do not know all that I want to know, but in order to stop him from leaving his shop tonight, I have caused the Hamburg cabin owners to write to him, since he had taken a passage, telling him that the ship's stores would not be ready until tomorrow, when at 1 hour before sunrise he would sail. Then you want to keep him in his shop another day? I do. I hope and expect that during that day, something may occur to clear up the mystery that still attaches to the mode in which he commits his murders. It may so. I think I can take measures by running some little personal risk to make it do so. But something must be hit upon to calm his mind regarding this affair at your house now, for he will expect nothing but instant arrest on its account. What can I do? If you will be guided by me, you will write Todd a letter, threatening him that if there is any more interference with Tobias, you will prosecute him, but that you will, if you hear no more of him at your house, say nothing of the past. You need be under no fear that he will derive any future advantage from such a promise, as any charge against him connected with poor Tobias will sink into insignificance, compared with other offenses. True, true. Such a letter, couched with the one concerning the non-departure of the ship, may keep him in his shop over to tomorrow. And then he sleeps in Newgate, from which building he steps on to the scaffold. But has he not sent many trunks and packages to the ship? Yes, and I have as regularly removed them all to the police office at Bow Street. We have already some thousands of pounds worth of property of the most costly description. But Johanna, what is to become of her? You may depend upon it that Todd will pursue the same course with her that he did with Tobias. He will give her a trifle of money, and tell her to get a night's lodging out, and in that case she knows where to come to be quite safe and comfortable. But if such should not be the case, my protecting arm is over her. I think I can almost defy Todd to do her any injury. Think you so? Yes, I have made such arrangements that if she were missed only for 10 minutes, Todd's house would be searched from top to bottom. I would not, for this right hand, that any harm should come to her. Nor I, be at ease regarding her, Colonel. I know how fully we may trust to you, and therefore I will be at ease regarding her, and I will at once write the letter to Todd you suggest to me. Do so. His fears upon your account must be calmed down. The colonel accordingly wrote the necessary note to Todd. Of course, neither he nor Sir Richard Blunt knew that Todd had another reason for wishing to be off that night, which consisted in his great unwillingness to meet Mrs. Lovett in the morning, for it will be recollected that he had an appointment with that lady upon money matters at an early hour. The reader is now fully aware of how matters stand, and will be able to comprehend easily the remarkable events which rapidly ensued upon the state of things, and therefore we can at once return to Todd. We left him upon his doorstep. It was never Todd's custom to walk at once into his house as any one else would do upon their arrival, whose conscience was not redolent of guilt, but he would peep and pry about, and linger like a moth fluttering around a candle, or a rat smelling at some tempting morsel, which may be connected with some artfully contrived trap. Before he entered, he wanted sadly to get a peep at what Charlie was doing. Now, poor Johanna, fortunately at that moment, was only sitting before the little miserable fire, holding her face in her hands, and deeply thinking of the once happy past. She had brought out from beneath the counter the sleeve of a sailor's jacket, which she had found upon her former examination of the shop, and after sprinkling it with some tears, for she fully believed it must have belonged to Mark and Jestry, she had hidden it again. And now, as she sat in that house of murder all alone, she was picturing to herself every tone and look of her lover when he had first told her that he loved her before, as she may have said in the words of the old song, "He loved me, and he sped away, far o'er the raging sea, to seek the gems of other lands and bring them all to me." At that moment, with all external objects hidden from her perception, she could almost fancy she could hear his voice as he had said to her, "My darling, I shall come back rich and prosperous, and we shall be happy." Alas, how sadly had that dream ended! He who had escaped the perils of the deep, he who had successfully battled with the tempest, and all the perils by sea and by land incidental to the life he had embarked in, had returned miserably to perish, almost within hearing of her for whom he had adventured so much. The thought was maddening. "And I live," she said. "I can live after that. Oh, Mark, Mark, I did not love you well enough, or I could not have existed so long after the horrible certainty of your fate has been revealed to me. They may say what they will to try to make me calmer and happier, but I know that he is Todd's victim." After this she sat for a time in a kind of stupor, and it was during that interval that Todd arrived home. There was no light in the shop but what at times came from a little flickering flame that would splutter into a moment's brief existence in the fire. But Todd, as he glared through the upper portion of the half-glass door at a spot where he knew the blind did not prevent him, could just see Johanna thus sitting. "Humph," he said. "The boy is quiet enough, and probably, after all, may suspect nothing, although I don't at all like his manner at times, yet it is safer to kill him before I go. It is absolute security. He shall help me to arrange everything to set the house on fire, and then when I have completed all my arrangements, it will be easy to knock him on the head." With this he opened the door. Johanna started. "Well," said Todd, "well, any one been?" "Only a man to be shaved, sir. I told him you would be home soon, but he could not wait, so he left." "Let him leave and get shaved at the devil," said Todd. You are sure no one has been here peeping and prying, and asking questions which you would be quite delighted to answer, eh? Peeping and prying, sir? Yes, peeping and prying. You know the meaning of that. Don't put on a look of surprise at me. It won't do. I known what you boys are. Curse you all. Yes, I know what you are. Johanna made no answer. Todd took off his hat and shook the rain from it violently. Then, in a voice that made Johanna start again, he cried, "Light the lamp, idiot!" It was quite clear that the occurrences at the Colonel's had not improved Todd's temper at all, and that upon very little pretext for it, he would have committed some act of violence of which Johanna may be the victim. Anything short of that she could endure, but she had made up her mind that if evening he so much as laid his hand upon her, her power of further patience would be gone, and she would be compelled to adopt the means of summoning aid which had been pointed out to her by Sir Richard Blunt, namely, by casting something through the window into the street. She lit the shop lamp as quickly as she could. "A lazy life you lead," said Todd. "A lazy life, truly. Well, well," he added, softening his tone, "it don't matter. I shall polish you off for all that, Charlie. What a pretty boy you are, sir! I say, what a pretty boy you are. Why, you must have been your mamma's pet, that you must." "I was. Ha, ha. Look at me, now. I was fondled and kissed once and called a pretty boy. Ha." Johanna shuddered. "Yes," added Todd, as he wiped himself down with a soiled towel, "yes, my mother used to make quite a pet of me. I often used to wish I was strong enough to throttle her. Ha, ha, that I did." "Throttle her, sir?" "Yes," added Todd, fiercely. "What the devil did she bring me into the world for her own gratifications, unless she had plenty of money to give me that I may enjoy myself in it? I don't know, sir." "You don't know? Who the devil supposed you did know? Answer me that, you imp." "Well, well, Charlie, you and I won't quarrel about such matters. Come, my boy, I want you to be of use to me tonight." "Tonight, sir?" "Yes, tonight. Is it broad daylight? Is the sun shining? Is there no such thing as night, under cover of which black deeds are done? Curse you! Why do you ask if tonight is the time for action? I will do your bidding, sir." "Yes, and who is this? Is this here keg of turpentine for you?" said a man, with it upon his shoulder. "Mr. Todd's this is, ain't it?" "Yes, yes, put it down, my good fellow. You ought to have something to drink." "Thank you kindly, sir, but you must pay for it yourself. There is a public house opposite." The man went away swearing, and scarcely had he crossed the threshold when a letter was brought by a lad and handed to Todd. Before he could ask any questions, the lad was gone. Todd held the letter in his hand and glared at the direction. It was to him, sure enough, and written in a very clerk-like hand, too. Before he could open it, someone hit the door a blow upon the outside, and it swung open. "Is this Todd's, the barber?" "Yes," said Johanna. "Then give him that letter, little chap, will you?" "Stop!" cried Todd. "Stop! Where do you come from, and who are you? Stop, you rascal! Will you stop?" Chapter LXXXVI. Todd receives two extraordinary letters and acts upon them. Todd looked the picture of amazement. "2 letters," he muttered. "2 letters to me, who seldom receive any, to me who have no acquaintances, no relations. Bah! It must be some mistake, or perhaps, after all, some infernal nonsense about the parish." He tore open the last received one, and read as follows. "Colonel Jeffrey informs Sweeney Todd that, although from a variety of reasons he may not think proper to prosecute him for his recent outrage at his house, he will, upon a repetition of such conduct, at once hand him over to the police." Todd's countenance, during the perusal of this brief note, betrayed a variety of emotions, and when he had concluded it, he let it drop from his hands, and knitting his brows, he muttered, "What does this mean?" That there must be something much more than met the eye in this boasted clemency of the Colonel towards him, he felt quite convinced, but what it was he was puzzled to think for a time. At length, brightening up, he said, "Yes, I have it. It is Tobias, it is Tobias. He cannot rid himself from the idea that I have some mysterious power of injuring his mother, and perhaps, after all, he may have made no disclosures to the colonel injurious to me. Comforted by this wide supposition, Todd picked up the letter again and put it in his pocket carefully. It is as well, he said, for I shall not now be hurried. No, I shall not be at all hurried now, which I may have been. Charlie. Yes, sir. Trim the lamp. Johanna did so, and while the process was going on, Todd opened the other letter. It was as follows: Sir, we beg to inform you that our Hamburg vessel in which you have done us the favor to take passage will not sail until tomorrow night at 4, God willing, and that consequently there will be no occasion for your coming on board earlier. We are, sir, your obedient servants, Brown, Buggins, Muggs, and Screamer. To Mr. S. Todd. Todd ground his tests together in a horrible manner. He dashed the letter to the floor and stamped upon it. Curse Brown and Buggins, he cried. I only wish I could dash out Muggs and Screamer's brains with Brown and Buggins's skulls. Confound them and their ships. May they all go to the bottom when I am out of them, and be smashed and d. Johanna was amazed at this sudden torrent of wrath. She could not imagine what had produced it, for Todd had read the letter in a muttering tone that effectually prevented her from hearing any of it. Suddenly he rose and rushed into the back room and bolted the door upon himself. He went to think what was best to be done. When he was alone he read both the letters again, and then he burst out into such a torrent of wrath against the shipowners that it was a mercy Johanna's ears were spared the dreadful words that came from his lips. Suddenly he saw a postscript at the foot of the shipowner's letter, which he had at first overlooked. P.S. The ship is removed to Crimmins' wharf, but will be at her old moorings at time mentioned above. D. And Crimmins and his wharf, too, cried Todd. He flung himself into a chair and sat for a time profoundly still. During that period he tried to make up his mind as to what it would be best for him, under the circumstances, to do. Many plans floated through his imagination. He could not for a long time bring himself to believe that the letter of the colonel's was anything but a feint to throw him off his guard in some way. At length he got into a calmer frame of mind. Shall I leave at once, or stay till tomorrow night? That is the question. He argued this with himself, pro and con. If he left he would have to secret himself somewhere all the following day, and the fact of his having left would make an active search, safe to be instituted for him, which would possibly be successful. Besides, how was he to conveniently set fire to his house, unless he was off on the moment that the flames burst forth? Then if he stayed he had Mrs. Lovett to encounter, but that was all, and surely he could put her off for a few hours. Surely she, of all people in the world, was not to run to a police office and destroy both him and herself, just because she did not get some money at 10 o'clock that he had promised to hand to her. She shall be put off, he said, suddenly, and I will stay over to tomorrow. I am safer here than anywhere else, of that I feel assured. If there are any suspicious whisperings about me at all, they will grow to loud clamors the moment I am gone, and then they may reach the ears of these shipowners, and they may say at once, why we have such a man with a passage taken in one of our Hamburg ships. Let them say that when the ship is some 20 hours gone with me on board, and I don't care, but with me on land, and the ship only to sail, instead of having actually sailed, it is quite a different matter. He rose from his seat. His mind was made up. He had not quite decided what he should say to Mrs. Lovett, but he had decided upon staying. Charlie will live another day, he muttered, but tomorrow night he dies, and his body will be consumed with this house, and, I hope, a good part of Fleet Street. It will not be prudent to get him to assist now in disposing the combustibles to fire the house. He may speak of it before tomorrow night. Todd came out into the shop. Charlie, my boy, how kindly he spoke. I am here, sir. You must not mind what I say when I am vexed. Many things happen to put me out of the way. Sometimes people that I have done I don't know how much for turn out to be very ungrateful, and then I get chafed. You see, Charlie, Yes, sir, no doubt. But after I have retired to the parlor and prayed a little, my mind soon recovers its usual religious tone and its wonted serenity, and for the sake of the Almighty, who, you know, is good to us all, Charlie, I forgive all that is done to me, and pray for the wicked. Johanna shuddered. This hypocrisy sounded awful to her. Never go to rest, Charlie, without saying your prayers. There's threepence for you. You can get yourself a bed in the neighborhood for that amount somewhere, I dare say. I am very sorry I cannot accommodate you here, Charlie. Now go away, and let me have you here by 7 in the morning. And mind, above all things, cultivate a religious spirit, and do unto your neighbors as you would that your neighbors should do unto you. Johanna could not reply. Here is a tract that you can read before you go to sleep, if they allow you a candle, when you get a bed. It is entitled Groans of Grace, or the Sinner Sifid, a most godly production, from a pious bookseller in Paternoster Row, Charlie. Yes, Johanna just managed to say, now you may go. She darted from the shop. Hilloa, hilloa, stop, stop, Charlie, stop, stop, will you? Confound you, stop. The infernal shutters are not up. Do you hear? I forgot them. Todd rushed to his door. He looked right and left, and over the way, and, in fact, everywhere, but no Charlie was to be seen. The fact is that Johanna, the moment she felt herself released from the shop, had darted over the way and into the fruiterer's, where she had found so friendly a welcome before, and all this was done in such a moment that she was housed before Todd could get his shop door open. Welcome, said a voice. She found it proceeded from the fruiterer's daughter, who had behaved so kindly to her. Johanna burst into tears. What has happened? What has happened? Cried the young girl. Nothing, now, said Johanna, but I cannot keep up longer than when I am in that shop. As soon as I am fairly out of the presence of that dreadful man, I feel ready to faint. Be of good cheer, said a deep-toned voice. She looked up and saw Sir Richard Blunt. You here, sir? Yes, Johanna, I have been now for some time watching Todd's shop from our friend's first-floor window. I saw you dart across the road, and for the moment feared something had gone wrong. Did Todd get 2 letters? He did. They will, I hope, keep him quiet until another night. Dare you go back again, Johanna, to that place? Yes, if it be necessary, but he has told me to sleep out, and the gust of pleasure I felt at the permission almost, I fear, betrayed me. He came to the door and looked furiously after you, but he did not see which way you had come. You were over here like a flash of light. He would have had me back again. Then, what could that be for? At all events, you shall not go until the morning, and not then, unless after a night's rest here, you feel that you can do so with a good heart. Oh yes, I will fulfill my mission. Todd is putting up his shutters, said the fruiterer, as he came in from his front shop. Ah, then the secret is out, said Sir Richard Blunt. That is what he wanted you back for, Johanna. He had forgotten at the moment all about the shutters, you may depend. I am glad he spared you the trouble. At any rate, I do not like you to perform any service for such a rank villain as he is. It would not have been for him, sir. For who, then? For the dead. I feel that I am bound to bring to justice the murderer of Mark in Jestry. When I was here last, sir, you strove to comfort me by making me feel a sort of hope that he was not dead. But I cannot think that. I would that I could, but truly I cannot, sir. Do not be too sure, Johanna. No, look at that. She laid before the magistrate the sleeve of the jacket that she had found at Todd's, and which fancy, for she certainly had no proof that way tending, told her had belonged to Mark in Jestry. What is this? Look at it, sir. My heart tells me that it was his. And so you suppose there was never but one sailor's jacket with ivory buttons on the wrist in the world, and never any one who wore one, but Mark in Jestry. No, the place in which it was found brings conviction. Not at all. Do you forget there was such a person as Thornhill in the world, Johanna? No. But why will every one persist in fancying Thornhill and in Jestry to be 2 persons, when I am convinced they were but one? Let who will identify this as part of Thornhill's apparel, and I will weep for Mark. I cannot just now shake this supposition. You never will. If I live, I will. Johanna, I give you my word for so much. Pray, who is the best to judge of such things? You, a young girl who have seen little or nothing of the world, and whose natural apprehension is rendered obscure by the conflict of your affections, or I whose business it is to come to an accurate conclusion of such matters? I repeat my conviction that Thornhill was not Mark in jestry. Oh, if I could think so! You will, you have no doubt, sir. But Thornhill perished by the hand of Todd? None whatever. Johanna looked deeply affected. Come, added Sir Richard, you want both rest and refreshment, and you can have both here at this house. To-morrow I hope will end all your trials, my dear girl, and I shall live, I trust, to see you smile as you ought to smile, and to be as happy as only a very dim recollection of the past will make you. Ah, no, never happy. You must love someone. You must recover, and in the cares and joys of a new existence, you must only look back upon what has passed, as though you pondered upon the phantasma of some fearful dream, and when you see all around you smiling, it will be cruel for them to smile, sir, and it is now cruel of you to speak to me of loving another, when you know my affections are within jestry, in that world to which he has gone before me, but to which I look forward to as the place of our happy meeting, where we shall part again no more. Well, I thought I could find you a lover that would be to your mind when all these affairs were over. Sir, no, be not offended. You know I am your sincere friend. I know you are, and that is what makes it so grievous to me to hear you talk in such a strain, sir. Then I will say no more. I thank you, Sir Richard, and I will forget what you have said, because I will recollect nothing from you, or committed with you, but kindness and consideration. Sir Richard smiled slightly for a moment as he turned aside and spoke to his friend the fruiterer for some minutes in a low tone. The young girl who had before behaved with such kindness to Johanna took her by the hand and led her upstairs. Come, she said, you shall tell me all you have suffered opposite since we parted last, and I will speak to you of him whom you love. You are too good to me. While all this was going on so close to him, Todd, with many oaths and execrations, was putting up his own shutters, which he did with a violence that nearly knocked the front of the window in. When he had finished, he walked into his house, and closing the door, he said, in a low tone, I must make up my mind what to say to Mrs. Lovett in the morning. I am afraid she will be hard to pacify. At this moment a man peered out from the inn gateway opposite and said to himself, now begins my watch. I dare say now Mrs. Lovett has some particular reason for watching this Barber, though she did not tell me. Chapter LXXXVI. Mr. Lupin meddles with other folks' affairs. Brother Oakley, is Sister Oakley within? This rather cool speech, cool considering all the circumstances, was uttered by no other than the Reverend Mr. Lupin to Mr. Oakley, who was working in his shop on the morning after Johanna had gone upon her perilous enterprise to Todd's. Mr. Oakley looked up with surprise upon his features. What? He said, is Sister Oakley within, brother? Don't call me brother, you canting hypocrite. How do you make out any such relationship, I should like to know? Are we not all brothers in the Lord? Foe, go along. No, Brother Oakley, my coming to you upon this day has, in good truth, a meaning. As he said these words, the countenance of the pious man had upon it a malignant expression, and there was a twinkle about his eyes, which said as plainly as possible, and that meaning is mischief. Old Oakley looked at him for some few seconds, and then he said, hark you, Mr. Lupin, you have already meddled too much in my affairs, and I desire now that you will be so good as to leave them alone. Humph, Brother Oakley, what I have to say concerns you to hear, but I would rather say it to your wife, who is a sister in the faith, and assuredly one of the elect, than I would say it to you, who will assuredly go to a warm place below for your want of faith. So I say again, is Sister Oakley within? If you mean my wife, replied the old spectacle maker, I am sorry to say that nobody knows less of her going out and coming home than I do. Truly, she frequents the tabernacle of the Lord, called Ebenezer, where we all put up a hearty and moving prayer for you. Nobody asks you. I believe you are a set of rascals. How pleasant this is. What is pleasant? To be nailed. How charming it is for the friends of Satan to call the saints hard names. Brother Oakley, you are lost, truly. If you call me brother again, you shall be lost, Mr. Lupin. I tell you once for all, I don't know anything of my wife's going out or coming home, and I don't want to see you in my shop any more. If it were not for one person in this world, and that one an angel, if ever one lived upon the earth, I should not care how soon my head was laid low. Humph, Brother Oakley, humph. Oakley caught up a file to throw at the head of the hypocrite, but there was such an expression of triumph upon his face that the heart of the old spectacle maker sunk within him as he thought to himself, "This man brings ill news, or he would never look as he does." The file dropped from his hands, and pushing his spectacles up to the top of his head, he glared at Lupin as he said, "Speak, speak. What have you to say? Humph. Speak, man, if you be a man. Humph. Brother Oakley, you have a daughter, Johanna?" "Yes, yes," cried old Oakley. "My heart told me that it was of my child this wretch came to speak. Tell me all instantly. Speak, what of my dear Johanna? I will wrest the truth from you. Has anything happened? Is she well? Speak, speak, Mr. Oakley sprang upon the preacher, and seizing him by the throat, forced him back until he fell upon an old chest in the shop that was full of tools, and the lid of which giving way with Lupin's weight and the sudden concussion with which he came upon it, precipitated him into the box among a number of pointed implements, the effect of which may be better imagined than described, as the newspapers say. "Murder! Murder!" screamed the preacher. "Now, you rascal," cried old Oakley, "say what you have got to say, and at once, too." "Murder!" again gasped Lupin. "Brother Oakley, spare my life." "I will not spare it if you are not quite explicit as regards what you have hinted of my child. Speak at once. Tell me what you have to say. Let me get up. Oh, be merciful and let me get up." "No, you can stay very well where you are. Be quiet and speak freely, in which case no harm will come to you." "Did you say, be quiet, Brother Oakley? Truly you would be anything but quiet in my situation. What induces you to keep all your tools in this chest with the points uppermost?" "You are trying to prevaricate now," said Oakley, suddenly snatching from the wall of his shop an antique sword that had hung there as a sort of ornament not entirely inconsistent with his trade. "You are trying to prevaricate with me now, and I must and will have your life. Prepare for the worst. You have now aroused feelings that cannot be so easily quelled again. Your last hour has come." The sight of the sword awakened the most lively feelings of terror in the mind of the preacher. He gave a howl of dismay, and made the most frantic efforts to get up out of the tool chest, but that was no easy matter, particularly as old Oakley flourished the antique sword in dangerous proximity to his nose. At length, lifting up his hands in the most supplicating manner, he cried, "Mercy, mercy, and I will tell." "Go on, then. Quick." "Yes, yes. Oh, dear, yes. I was sojourning in this ungodly city, and taking my way, deep in thought, upon the wickedness of the world, the greater portion of the inhabitants of which will assuredly go down below, where there is howling and— You rascal, I'll make you howl if you do not come to the point quickly." A flourish of the sword, so close to the face of Mr. Lupin that he really believed for the moment it had taken the end of his nose off, admonished him that the patience of Mr. Oakley was nearly exhausted, and in a whining tone, he added, "Truly, I was in the street called Fleet Street, when as I was crossing the way, a young lad nearly upset me into the kennel. He did not see me, but I saw him. Truly, Brother Oakley, I saw the face of that individual." "Well, what is that to me? I ask you, what is he to me?" "Go on." "Oh, oh, though. Don't say I have not prepared you for the worst." "Oh, though. Now, Brother Oakley, I will tell you, evening although it provoke an abundance of wrath. That boy, that individual who nearly overthrew me, one of the elect as I am, into the kennel had the face of your daughter, Johanna. The spectacle maker looked confused, as well he may. The face of my daughter, Johanna, he said. What do you mean? Is all this cock and a bull story about some boy in the street, who happened in your eyes to bear a resemblance to my child? Humph. I, truly, humph, so striking a resemblance, that sitting here, evening as I am upon the points of many instruments of steel and of iron, I aver that that boy was Johanna Oakley. Oakley staggered back, and the antique sword dropped from his hand, a proceeding which Mr. Lupin profited sufficiently by to scramble out of the tool chest and make towards the door. In another moment he would have left the shop, for he had done all the mischief he could by telling the anxious father such a tale, but suddenly Oakley snatched the sword from the floor again, and rushing after Mr. Lupin, he caught him by the skirts at the very nick of time, and dragged him into the shop again. Holding then the sword to his throat, he said, "Scoundrel, how dare you come and tell me such a thing? Your life, your worthless life, ought to pay the penalty of such an odious falsehood." "No, no," cried Lupin, falling upon his knees, for he saw the sword uplifted. "No, what if it be true? What if it be true?" The old man's hands shook, and the point of the sword, which had been in most dreadful proximity to Mr. Lupin's throat, was gradually lowered until it touched the floor. Tell me again, gasped Oakley. The preacher saw that his danger was over, and rising, he took a handkerchief from his pocket, and began deliberately to dust his knees, as he said in a low snuffling voice, "Truly, you are a vessel of wrath, brother Oakley." "Stop," cried Oakley. "I have told you before not to call me brother. I have no fellowship or brotherhood with you. Do not tempt me to more violence by the use of that word." "Let it be as you please," said Lupin, "but as regards the maiden, who for a surety is fair to look upon, although all flesh is grass, and beauty wans after a season, I want none of your canting reflections. To your tale. When and where was it that you saw my child?" "In the street called Fleet, as I and all of us are sinners. She wore nether garments suitable and conformable unto a boy, but not to a girl, as the way of the world goes, and yet she looked comely did the maiden, aye, very comely. I was moved to see her truly. Her eyes there was no mistaking, and her lips, aye, it was the maiden. But after sitting in the kennel for one moment into which I fell, and getting up again amid the laughter of the ungodly bystanders, I found that she was gone." "And so you have come on to me with this monstrous tale?" "Monstrous tale," said Mr. Lupin, turning round as though he expected to find such an appendage flourishing behind him. "I am not aware." The old spectacle maker staggered into a seat, and holding his hands clasped before him for a few moments, he strove to think calmly of what had been told to him. The preacher was not slow in taking advantage of this condition into which Mr. Oakley fell, to protect himself against any further danger from the sword. He picked up that weapon from the floor, and not finding any place readily in the shop where he may effectually hide it, he held it behind his back, and finally thrust the long blade of it between his coat and his waistcoat, where he thought it was to be sure wonderfully well hidden. He did not calculate that the point projected above his coat collar, and his head some 6 inches or so, presenting a very singular appearance truly. He then waited for Oakley to speak, for to tell the truth, the curiosity of Lupin was strongly excited concerning Johanna, as well as his sense of enjoyment, tickled by the distress of the father whom he considered his enemy. After this he waited patiently enough to see what course the afflicted man would pursue, and, truly, the whole conduct of Lupin was most convincing of the fact that he entertained no doubt whatever as to the identity of the supposed boy he had seen in Fleet Street. The time at which he had seen Johanna must have been when she ran over the road from Todd's shop and took refuge in the fruiter's. Well, then, poor Mr. Oakley was trying to think. He was trying to convince himself that it could not possibly have been Johanna who had been seen by the preacher, but then there was still present to his mind the impression that had been made upon it by the singular manner in which she had bidden him adieu upon the last occasion of his seeing her. He remembered how she had come back after leaving the shop with her young friend, Arabella Wilmot, and how then, with a burst of feeling, she had taken of him a second farewell. No wonder then that, by combining that with the information Lupin had brought, the father found enough to shudder at, and he did shudder. Mr. Lupin watched him attentively, suddenly rising, with a face pale as death itself. Oakley advanced to Lupin, and laying his hand upon his breast, he said to him, "Man, I suspect that there is much hypocrisy in your nature. It may be unjust to do so. It may be that I am doing you a wrong. But yet I do think in my heart that you are one of those who adopt the garb and the language of piety for the selfish purposes of human nature. And yet you must have some feeling. At the bottom of evening such a heart as yours, there must be some touch of humanity, and by that I conjure you to say if you have told the truth to me in this matter concerning my child." "I have," said Lupin. "If you have not, I will say nothing to you. I will be guilty of no attempt at revengeful violence. Only tell me so, and you shall go in peace." "What I have told you of the maiden is true," said Lupin. "I saw her. With these eyes I saw her." The spectacle maker slipped off his working apron, and the black sleeves he wore over his coat to protect it from the dust and other destructive matters incidental to his work-bench, and then he snatched his hat from a peg upon which it hung in the shop. "Come," he said, "come, you and I will walk together to the house, where I was told Johanna was to be, and if I do not find her there, I will thank you for the information you have given to me. I will not stop to inquire what were your motives in giving it, but I will thank you for it. Come with me." "Truly I will come with you," said Lupin, "for I am curious. That is to say, I am in a religious point of view, anxious to know what has become of the maiden, who was so fair to look upon always, although she had not a godly spirit." Oakley locked up his shop, and put the key in his pocket. Chapter LXXXVI. Todd astonishes Mrs. Lovett's spy. We return to Todd. After he had put up his own shutters, and properly secured his doors for the night, he lit the lamp in his parlor, and glancing curiously around him, he muttered, "Yes, this will assuredly be the last night here. How I hate the look of anything, and how eagerly I shall banish from my mind all kind of remembrance of this place when I am in another land, as I shall be shortly. Let me see. I will embrace the Catholic religion, and I will be most devout. The regularity of my religious exercises shall do much for me. Truly, I do not think I could have remained so long in London, if I had not had the prudence to be regular at the church. It is true that of late I have neglected all that, but then I am going soon, and it does not matter." Todd sat down and looked over the memoranda of things he had to do that he had made. He felt tolerably satisfied with the condition of affairs. That Colonel Jeffrey and that others suspected him, he could not doubt, but he felt quite confident that he should be far off before those suspicions repaired into anything dangerous to him. He still clung to the idea that they knew nothing, or else they would arrest him, and while such did not ensue, he considered himself as in a tolerably safe position. He then set about the preparations for firing his house. We need not follow him through those preparations. We need not state how he soaked clothes in turpentine and oil, and how he placed them in such positions, combined with small packages of gunpowder and lumps of rosin, that if a torch were to be applied at the lower part of the house, the whole would be in a few moments in a blaze. Suffice it to say that Todd worked hard for the next 2 hours, and that by the time they had gone he had got everything ready for the perpetration of that last crime which he intended to commit before he crossed the threshold of his house upon the following night, to leave it forever. Todd preparing combustibles to fire his house. Todd preparing combustibles to fire his house. More than once during these 2 hours he drank brandy. The ardent spirit had become necessary to the existence of Todd now, and, when he took a draught at the conclusion of his labors, he smiled grimly as he said, "Charlie Green will have quite a funeral of flame. He shall die, and his body shall be consumed in the blazing fragments of this house, and it will go hard but this side of Fleet Street suffers." Oh, if the flames would only spread to the old church, I should rejoice much at that, and they may do so. Yes, they may do so. Ha, ha, I shall be remembered in London. As he spoke, a dull heavy sort of sound at the outer door of his house came upon his ears. It was as though something heavy had been thrown against it. With fear expressed upon every feature of his face, Todd listened for repetition of the sound. It did not come again. Todd began to breathe a little more freely, and yet he kept asking himself, what was it? And the utmost powers of his imagination could return him no feasible answer to the interesting inquiry. But nothing was more easy than to go to the door and see if any one was there, or if anything had happened to it. Should he open it for such a purpose? Should he unbar and unbolt at the risk of he knew not what? No, he would, from the first floor balcony, and there was a frail one, reconnoiter the street. He should then be easily able to see if there were any danger. He had no sooner made this determination than he carried it out by ascending the dark blackened staircase, conducting to the upper part of his house, that staircase which was now so completely covered by combustible materials. At every few steps he took he listened attentively. He thought there may yet be a repetition of the sound, but no, all was still, and by the time he reached his first floor he was in some sort recovered from his first fright. That was something. He left his light upon the stairhead, for he had no wish to point himself out to the chance passengers in Fleet Street, or perhaps to some enemy, by going into that room with a light in his hand. No, Todd was much too acute for that, so carefully closing the door, so that no ray of light got in from the staircase, he crept to the window. The shutters had to be unfastened, for Todd's house was always carefully closed up like the Duke of Wellington's at the present day. He very quickly unclosed one of the long disused windows, and opening it gently, looked out over the edge of the little crazy balcony into the street. Something big and black was against his door. The more Todd bent his gaze upon this object, the more a kind of undefined terror took possession of him, and the more puzzled he was to give a name to the dark mass that had been laid upon his threshold. There was no lamp very near his house, or else, miserable as was the light from those old oil apologies for illuminators, some few rays may have fallen upon the dark mass and told Todd what it was. But no, all was dark and dubious, and he strained his eyes in vain to penetrate the mystery. I must go down, he said. I must open the door. Yes, I cannot live and not know what this is. I must open the door, however reluctantly, and ascertain precisely. Ah! While Todd was talking, and still keeping his eyes fixed upon the mysterious object at his door, he saw suddenly in the amid of it a bright luminous spark, as if something connected with it was of a red heat, and slowly smouldering on fire. If he was before puzzled to account for the phenomenon of a dark object, without shape or form, lying propped up against his door, he was now more than ever confounded, and his imagination started some of the most improbable conjectures in the world to account for the appearance. He thought that it must be some combustible which, in the course of a few moments, would go off with a stunning report and blow his street door to atoms. But then again, what could be the object of such a thing? The more he considered the affair from above, the more he was puzzled and terrified. So at last, with a feeling of desperation, he ran downstairs and began to unfasten the street door. He did not pause in his work until he had flung it open, and then the mystery was explained. A man, half asleep, with a lighted pipe in his mouth, rolled backwards into the shop, and as he did so, with the dreamy half-consciousness that he was upon some sort of duty, he said, "I'll watch him, Mrs. Lovett. He shan't get away without your knowing of it, ma'am." Todd understood the man's errand in a moment. Of course he had been employed to watch him by Mrs. Lovett, who had a slight idea that he may not be forthcoming for the promised morning settlement. Todd seized the man by the collar, and dragging him fairly into the shop, closed the door again. "Ah," he said, "a good joke." "What's a joke, sir?" said the man. "What's a joke?" "Murder. Where am I? Where am I? Help." "Hush," said Todd. "Hush. It's of no consequence. I know all about it, man. Mrs. Lovett employed you to watch me. She was a little jealous, but we have made it all right now, and she asked me, if I saw you, to pay you and give you a glass of something beside. Did she, sir? To be sure she did. So come in, and you can tell her when you see her in the morning, that you had of me a glass of as good liquor as could be found in London. By the by, what am I to pay you? A guinea, sir. Exactly. It was a guinea, of course. This way, my friend, this way. Don't fall over the shaving chair, I beg of you. You can't hurt it, for it is a fixture, but you may hurt yourself, and that is of more importance to you, you know. While we do live in this world, if it be for ever so short a time, we may as well live comfortably. Talking away thus all suspicion from the man, who was not one of the brightest of geniuses in the world, Todd led the way to the parlor, that fatal parlor which had been the last scene of more than one mortal life. He closed the door, and then in quite a good-humored way he pointed to the seat, saying, "Rest yourself, my friend, rest yourself, while I get out the bottle. And so it is 1 guinea that I am to give you, eh?" "Yes, sir. And all I can say is that I am very glad to hear that you and Mrs. Lovett have made matters all right again. Very glad, truly, sir, I may say. In course, I shouldn't have took the liberty of sitting down by your door, sir, if she had not told me to watch the house and let her know, if so be as you come out of it, or if I saw any packages moving. She didn't say anything to me what it was for, but a guinea is just as well earned easy as not, you see, sir." "Certainly, my friend, certainly. Drink that." The man tossed off the glass of something that Todd gave him, and then he licked his lips as he said, "What is it, sir?" "It's strong, but I can't say, for my part, that I like the flavor of it much." "Not like it?" "Not much, sir." "Why, it's a most expensive foreign liquor that is, and by all the best judges in the kingdom is never found fault with. Very few persons, truly, have tasted it, but of those few, not one has come to me to say, 'Mr. Todd.'" "Good God," said the man, as he clasped his head with both of his hands. "Good God, how strange I feel. I must be going mad." "Mad," cried Todd, as he leant far over the table so as to bring his face quite close to the man's. "Mad? Not at all. What you feel now is part of your death pang. You are dying. I have poisoned you. Do you hear that? You have watched me, and I have in return poisoned you. Do you understand that? Todd poisons Mrs. Lovett's spy and tells him of it. Todd poisons Mrs. Lovett's spy and tells him of it." The dying man made an ineffectual effort to rise from the chair, but he could not. With a gasping sob he let his head sink upon his breast. He was dead. "They perish," said Todd, "one by one. They who oppose me perish, and so shall they all. Ha! So shall they all, and she who set this fool unto his destruction shall feel, yet, the pang of death, and know that she owes it to me. Yes, Mrs. Lovett, yes." He closed his arms over his breast and looked at the body for some moments in silence, and then, with a sneer upon his lips, he added, "No, Mrs. Lovett, you did not show your judgment in this matter. Had you wished to watch me, you should have done it yourself, and not employed this poor weak wretch who has paid the price of his folly. Go, go." He struck the chair from under the dead man with his foot, and the corpse that had partially been supported by it and the table fell to the floor. Another kick sent it under the large table, and then, as another of Todd's victims had once done, it disappeared.